start our board meeting work session. We'll start with introductions. We'll do the room first. I'm Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Zan Ojiro, Commissioner.
And Bill Daniel, Commissioner.
Lynn McKee, Fairgrounds Manager, sitting in for Joe Kirby, County Administrator.
Alyssa Rash, Public Information Officer. Lilia Neville, Board of Commissioners Office.
All right, and those who are joining us online.
Hi.
Morning, Mike.
All right. Hello.
Yep, we hear you.
Lori Starha, Benton County Natural Resources and Parks Director.
Good morning.
Teresa Farley, Board of Commissioners. Lynn Brown, Sustainability Program.
Hi everybody, Tommy Abdul Corval, School Board Chair.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. Kate Portia, Corvallis, Benton County Economic Development Office.
Morning, Kate. All right. And looks like we have a couple guests. Our first, well, let's see. We have from Northwest Natural Gas, Bill Edmonds. And
Good morning, Bill Edmonds here.
morning, Bill. Anybody else from your team joining us this morning, Bill?
Good morning, John Clore with Northwest Natural.
Good morning, Jennifer Yoakum from Northwest Natural.
All right. Well, welcome. All right. Are there any announcements? Okay, hearing none. Any comments from the public? Okay. We will review and then approve our agenda.
I just wanted to mention that during the economic development update, I'd like to discuss the regional broadband proposal and the matching money that the county will need to put forward for that. I spoke to Mary Otley and to Joe Kirby about that last week, so it's in the pipeline, but we want to bring it to the board.
Okay. Anything else?
There are also a couple of discussions we have to have about liaison roles, and we can bring that up during our commissioner updates, if that's okay.
Sure. That would be appropriate. Okay. Let's see. So any other changes to the agenda? Okay. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Since our last meeting, there have been no chair decisions that I know about. So we'll start our work session. First up is the folks from Northwest Natural. So I'm not sure who's the lead on that, but go ahead. And it looks like you've got your slideshow lined up here, and go ahead.
All right. Good morning, Commission. It's a pleasure to join you this beautiful summer morning. My name is John Clore. I'm the Community Affairs Manager for Northwest Natural. Joining me this morning is Jennifer Yoakum, our Local Government Affairs Manager, and the star of our show, Bill Edmonds, our Director of Environmental Management and Sustainability. So with that, I will turn things over to Bill for the presentation.
Great. Thanks, John. Chair Malone, Commissioners, and assembled guests. Thanks so much for giving us some time. I'll be going through what we're calling our low carbon pathway today. It should take about 20 minutes. I'll move right along through it. Of course, there's a 2-hour version, and you're being spared that one. But hopefully in about 20 minutes, I can give you a taste of this low carbon pathway and give you a chance to have 10 minutes of questions or so. John, let's go to that first slide. The way we make sure that sometimes these slides just take a moment. Here we are. Okay, it really starts with shared values, and maybe even before that, it starts with this first bullet, that there's a climate imperative. It may be that we don't need to say that anymore, that, that everyone we're talking to agrees with that, but it's really important, I think really important, for a gas utility to begin with that bullet, that there's a climate imperative. And there's no argument, and shouldn't be any argument about that. It means we have to act quickly, and as a gas utility, we have a responsibility to our customers and to the planet to act quickly. And it's our belief that we must evolve and innovate together, and you'll hear more about what we mean by that. And really importantly, we must do this in a way that leaves no one behind. What do we mean by that? We mean that that's not an excuse not to act and act quickly, but it's a real reason to go as cost-effectively down that curve as we can. Let's find the cheapest way to reduce. It's a responsibility so that our costs don't go up more than they need to. It really comes from this triple bottom line approach where equity, environment, and economy all have to be optimized together. And of course, by equity, we mean that we serve a product, an essential service to a whole bunch of customers as we heat their homes and heat their water, and we really need to have our eyes on those most vulnerable customers as we're doing that. Environment and economy have to go together. We have to find ways to reduce greenhouse gases, but we also realize that our product not only is heating homes and heating businesses, but also helping our economy through industry, and that means being part of a job recovery. So having a product that is part of that job recovery, we need to watch the cost of that product. So it takes all those things working together, equity, environment, economy, in this context of a climate imperative that gets us to this low carbon pathway. Next slide, John. Before going on a trip, and I'm taking you down this low carbon pathway, it's really important to understand the starting point of this trip. And this slide is really the only one that looks at what does natural gas do in our economy today. Some people might know this, but I think as we talk to people, we're finding a lot of people are surprised. We heat a whole lot of homes and a whole lot of businesses. In our service territory, 74% of that residential square footage is heated by gas. So, you know, as you walk down the street, you can say gas, 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 electricity, gas, 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 electricity. Because we heat a lot of homes, it's really important to think very carefully through how is it that we continue to heat those homes. While we carry a big punch all the time because we're heating a lot of homes, it's really also important, because they have how the energy system works, to think about what happens on the very coldest day. On that cold winter day, hard to think about it when it's 92, but we might, as you know, because you live here, have 5 cold days that are, you know, in the teens, 5 in a row, where we don't get a break. That winter peak is when gas really shines. We provide 90% of the energy of a home as we provide the space heat and the water heat during those cold winter days. And why am I going into this level of detail? A bunch of reasons, really, but one of them is that there is a narrative. We're fully aware of it. I'm sure you're aware of it too, that some people are saying the only way to get to deep decarbonization, the only way to get to our deep decarbonization goals is to electrify everything and clean up the grid. And what you'll hear from us is we do believe we will be electrifying a whole lot of things, like vehicles, but it is really hard to electrify all this space heat I'm talking about, and I'll be explaining why. But in short, it just adds to what has to happen during that winter peak, because we're providing so much energy during those cold days. We're doing that with one of the most modern gas systems in the country. We've taken out our old pipe and put in new pipe. So we're not leaking gas, and I guess importantly, the pie chart shows how we're doing all this work for not very much emissions. That's the Oregon greenhouse gas emissions pie, And you might think, well, if you're doing all that work with natural gas, there must be a big emissions impact. And what that pie shows is that we're bringing gas to our customers for 5% of the state's emissions pie. You can see electricity and transportation and the other sectors are a good bit larger than what direct use of gas, and Northwest Natural is 5% of that whole pie. Now, 5% is a small number, but we're not saying, therefore, don't bother us or our customers are fine. We need to remake how we're delivering gas to our customers and what we're delivering. And that's what our low carbon pathway is all about. We need to squeeze that 5% way down because of the carbon imperative. So let's go to this evolution that I'm talking about. I'll sometimes talk to people and they'll say, how can a gas utility evolve? I'm not sure I believe that you can. And maybe I'm being a little cute, but I say that's the wrong question. The right question is, can we evolve again? Northwest Natural is the second oldest company in Oregon. We're a year older than the state itself. So we have evolved with the times. We were, in fact, just providing street lights when we first started out, and we're doing that with something called city gas, not really even natural gas. Then the natural gas pipeline came in the 50s. We had to change out everyone's appliances, so it worked on natural gas. In the 2000s, we changed completely how we bill customers because energy efficiency was really important, and we wanted to make really clear that we're not going to make more money when we sold more gas. So we were a real leader in this thing called decoupling, which means our company doesn't make more money when you use more gas. And now in that final square, there's a whole new evolution, a whole new company being built here as we put renewable natural gas and renewable hydrogen in our pipeline to deeply decarbonize, and I'll be talking more about that. So we've evolved before, and we fully believe we can evolve again. Next slide there, John. What's required is this new thinking. What's the goal of this new thinking? Emission reductions, fast and affordable, as possible. Luckily, we've seen this happen before. We saw it happen on the electric side, where we were using a lot of coal and a fair amount of natural gas, and people said, we need to decarbonize the electric grid. And when we said that, we didn't say, I know, let's cut the wires down and we'll start all over. What we said was, let's put different things on the wires. And the same holds true for the gas delivery system. We don't have to deliver natural gas. We can deliver what's called renewable natural gas and renewable hydrogen. You'll hear more about those. That's how you decarbonize the gas grid. So we will be, as I said, electrifying vehicles. Most studies say that in 2050, about 100% of our vehicles need to be electric. Those can be charged at night and don't add a whole bunch of cost to the system. When you electrify space heat, as you know, you have to heat your home when you have to heat your home, in the morning when you wake up, and so you can't do that at another time, and that's what adds a whole lot of cost to the system. So what does this mean for us? It means that bottom bullet, that we're pursuing 100% carbon neutral pipeline, and we don't think there's any technical barrier to getting to that 100% carbon neutral pipeline. Let's explain a little bit of how we do that. The first important I'm about there, but first, let's go to the important question of low-income customers and how you take care of them during this transition. One of the important ways is to make sure that low-income homes are weatherized. You may know that we work really closely with the Community Service Consortium. That's a group, a nonprofit that serves Lynn, Lincoln, and Benton counties, and we provide dollars for this CSC to help weatherize low-income homes. And that's going at a good clip, but not the clip it needs to go. Since 2015, about 150 homes, over $1 million to help weatherize these homes. And what weatherizing a home, of course, means is if electricity and gas prices go up, the bill doesn't need to go up because that home is tighter and more affordable to live in. Because of COVID needs and because of other, honestly, just increasing demand and joblessness, we've gone to the Public Utilities Commission and deepened and expanded this low-income weatherization program, so we'll have more dollars to help folks like Community Service Consortium weatherize more homes. And this is going to be more and more important as we pursue the low-carbon pathway to make sure that those customers who can least afford any price increases are taken care of. Another piece of that, John, is the next slide is about energy efficiency. And when I talk about the low-income pathway, low-carbon pathway, I like to say it's about energy efficiency, energy efficiency, energy efficiency. That's really the foundation of everything else. We need to help our customers use less of what we sell. And the way you do that is through energy efficiency. This graph is a little wonky, a little technical. It comes out of what's called our integrated resource plan. The blue box is what we already know we can do, working with the Energy Trust to help squeeze down usage. If we weren't doing it, we'd be on that green bar. But what we need to do under the low carbon pathway is that red-orange line, that 47% reduction. And the way you do that is through new technologies, things called a gas heat pump water heater and a gas heat pump that can, in our homes, use very little gas but provide the same hot water and the same space heat. That's a technology that's being piloted around the region. It should be ready to go in a couple of years, and it's going to be really important as we squeeze down how much gas is used by each of our homes and businesses. That's where the low carbon pathway starts, helping our customers use less. Next slide there. Besides using less, though, just as importantly, really, is putting low-carbon gas into our pipeline. And this is something that just takes a minute, because I think the first time we've started describing it to people, I think they scratch their head. They may not have seen these words together, renewable natural gas. So it's really important for me to start with, what is it? What is this renewable natural gas you're talking about? I think we do all know that there are wastewater treatment plants, there's landfills, there's dairies, there's even agricultural residue. All this is organic matter that is managed in different ways, but it sits on our planet's surface and emits methane as it decomposes. That methane is a powerful greenhouse gas and something we need to address if we're going to be serious about the climate imperative. One way to address it, the best way to address it, is to capture that methane. As an example, you take the manure from the lagoon at the dairy and you put it into a biodigester. That captures all that methane. You can now, with new technology largely developed in Europe, you can clean that gas up and put it right on our pipeline and serve customers with it. That's a new product in a sense, and it's a renewable product because that methane was going to be emitted. Now it's being captured and put to use. That's what renewable natural gas is. It's connecting a wastewater treatment plant like we're doing in Portland and Eugene and connecting it to our system so that our customers can use that gas. You might say, well, it's just a wastewater treatment plant. Is there really that much gas? Oregon Department of Energy did the very first good state study of this and found 48 BCF as the technical potential. That's the same amount of gas that all residential customers in all of Oregon use. So studies since then have even suggested there's more than that first early Oregon study. But what it shows is there's a whole lot of potential to drive renewable natural gas into our pipeline, basically turning waste into energy. Next slide, please, John. People who followed the electric sector probably know that when we were first developing wind and solar, just little pilot projects here and there, and then we passed something called a Renewable Portfolio Standard that said utilities have to buy more and more renewables and put them in the system and get them to all customers. The gas system didn't have any of that. Northwest Natural is a real leader in this, and we worked with legislators to pass SB 98 2 sessions ago. And it really is like a renewable portfolio standard on the gas side. It says, okay, gas utilities, put more and more renewable product into your pipe. You can charge a certain amount of to purchase that slightly more expensive gas, 5% of our revenue requirement. to make sure that we can add that RNG or renewable natural gas to our system. It's the most aggressive law in the country. Other states are beginning to look at it. In fact, Colorado took our law, scratched out Oregon, and wrote Colorado and tried to pass it. It didn't quite pass this last session in Colorado, but it's just a sign of Oregon leading the way, and we're proud of the work we worked on, but really proud of our legislators and others that were able to pass the bill. The rules are coming out right in July, so just next month, and then we will be purchasing large amounts of renewable natural gas and putting them on our system for all customers. Next slide, John. The renewable natural gas is, just as I described, it's these organic waste that we can capture, put in our pipe, and bring to customers. You've been hearing me also talk about renewable hydrogen. That's slightly over the hill from renewable natural gas, but it's a technology that we totally know how to do. It's being done in Europe, and it's slowly coming to North America. I'll describe it briefly. As we add more and more solar and wind to our electric system, we're going to have some of those renewable products at times when we can't use them. What do I mean by that? It's really windy in the spring. There's a lot of hydro in the spring, but we need the winter. We need that energy in the winter. So what do? You can't actually take that electricity, that excess electricity, and put it in a battery and store it for the winter. Batteries don't work don't work over a long period of time. I guess we all know that. If you don't start your car for a while, the power of the battery dissipates and you can't start your car. Batteries are good for short-term storage, not long-term storage. So what do we do about long-term storage? You take that excess electricity, you put it through what's called electrolysis, and back to our high school chemistry, you break the oxygen and the hydrogen apart, and you have what's called renewable hydrogen. That renewable hydrogen can go a whole bunch of different places. It could go into a fuel cell vehicle, it could go to operate industry, and it can be put directly on our pipeline along with that renewable natural gas to decarbonize our pipeline. We believe this renewable hydrogen is going to be a big piece of the overall equation as we get to a fully decarbonized pipeline by 2050. So when I say renewable hydrogen, think about this diagram about, and I know I'm giving you a lot here in a short amount of time, but taking renewable electricity and turning it into renewable hydrogen, because those molecules, those renewable molecules, can be used and stored in ways that electricity can't be. So that's power to gas. Thanks, John. And I'm going to just have one more slide here before I open it up for questions. This was sort of the gas system of the future, and I guess what I'm proud of is that we put this schematic together 5 or 6 years ago, and when we were drawing it up, we said, you know, this is the view of 2050, what a gas utility could look like. And now it's 2020, and we're doing it all. Not on great scale yet, but we're doing it all in some way. This slide shows connecting wastewater treatment plants and connecting farms. It shows how we're using efficiency and district systems in the cities. It shows how we're filling large vehicles with natural gas, renewable natural gas, which is happening out at the Portland wastewater treatment plant. So this view of the future, and of course it will evolve from where we are today, but the view of the future of the gas utility is not the gas utility of today. It's a decarbonized pipeline that's using gas very carefully and in just the right way so that we're not wasting any of it. So that's the gas system of the future. We are excited to partner with folks like the county as we help our low-income customers, but also as we spread the word about what a gas utility can and honestly should be in a carbon-constrained world. We're excited to be leading the way, and we think we're well on our way. With that, if John or Jennifer want to add anything, I sometimes forget an important point and would love them to clean up after me, but I'm also happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Bill or other members of the of his team.
As this evolution occurs, what kind of time frame are we looking at within the future? At what point will we see the next generation, and then following that, what the next generation would be of development of this resource?
Yes, Commissioner, great question. I think the first milestone really is we will have rules by July 31st from this new law, and I would expect within 6 months of that new rule for us to be announcing fairly large contracts of purchases of RNG. So that's milestone one. And then it really will be a reliance on renewable natural gas first to start building the percentage of how much renewable natural gas, and there's some targets in the law, and we believe that we will need to hit and then exceed those targets. At the same time, renewable hydrogen, I didn't actually use these numbers, but there's 150 projects in Europe, and there's 3 in North America. We would like the 4th to be with us and eWeb in Eugene, and we've got a exciting pilot project put together with eWeb to start making hydrogen and getting it on our pipeline. So that's maybe a next milestone, which is making hydrogen in small amounts and getting it on the pipeline so that we can see that happen in much larger scale. In the end, the goal is a carbon neutral pipeline through efficiency, hydrogen, and RNG by 2050.
I have a couple of questions. We can just take turns. One of the points that you made, let me see, that natural gas accounts for just 5% of the emissions based on an Oregon DEQ analysis, but you mentioned that it was in the legend it said it was in boundary, and does that mean that it only accounts for the portion of the life cycle for the natural gas here in Oregon, and doesn't take into account the full life cycle for that natural gas?
Thank you, Commissioner. Another good question. The way Oregon DEQ analyzes the emissions is it is all in boundary, and so doesn't look at the full life cycle of gas or electricity. We have done the accounting with full life cycle analysis. So as we put together our documents on the low carbon pathway and describe the benefits of for example, moving from conventional natural gas to renewable natural gas that's produced right here in cities like Portland and Eugene, that benefit also includes any upstream benefits as well, any upstream emissions as well. I guess just a footnote, since you're pointing a little towards upstream, there is some understandable concern about emissions upstream in production. Proud of work that Northwest Natural is doing to score our producers and to begin purchasing only from those producers that score best on upstream emissions. We don't need to buy from just everybody. We can buy from those who have the tightest production values, and we should, and that's the market basically speaking. In many cases, there's some good regulations. We buy from Colorado and Wyoming, and Colorado has the gold standard for state regulation. But if there aren't good regulations, then the market should speak, and we believe our customers would want us to be doing that, and we're beginning that work.
Thank you.
I had one more question. Looking at this, we're talking about large scale here. You're going to be, my guess is, looking at larger entities that would be receiving this. At what point does it come to the smaller scale to the local homeowner, for example? And what about currently used equipment? Will it still be adaptable to this new technology?
Thank you, Commissioner. More good questions. First to resident versus large. Just like when wind is put on the electric wires, it goes everywhere. And under SB 98, we'll be adding renewable gas, and it will, in a sense, go everywhere. I think folks know that gas gets pulled off the pipe nearby where it's produced, in a sense, but it will be a system-wide resource. So the RNG will go to my home and your home, if you're gas heated. in just the same way as renewable products go. It may be that there are some large entities that want to buy even a larger percentage of renewable gas, and we are working on developing a voluntary tariff for, say, a large gas user that says, to meet my sustainability goals, I want to be at 50% renewable and then 100% renewable on a faster time frame than you're doing for all customers. And they'll have a way that would require them to pay some extra to move faster than that. So we'll have a baseload renewable product that all customers will be getting, and then they'll have a voluntary tariff for people who want to move faster. Sorry, Commissioner, your other...
The last part of my question was, let me give you an example. I just bought a new furnace. And
oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Do I have to buy a new furnace? One of the keys for the... two keys, really. One, renewable natural gas is methane, which is exactly like what comes up from underground. We have a very tight spec. It has to hit the same heat rate as the natural gas that we buy from Colorado, so there's no change in your appliances. Hydrogen is the one where that's why we're doing a bunch of study around hydrogen. What Europe is finding is that you can add 5 to even 20% hydrogen, which is a whole lot of hydrogen, to the pipeline before you need to adjust appliances. We know that people are not interested in buying all new furnaces, and so keeping that hydrogen down below that threshold will be really important. What we saw in Europe, a few were able to go over and see because they're advancing quickly. What gas utilities are thinking about is adding that 10% or 20% hydrogen to the whole system, and then having dedicated hydrogen lines that would go from a hydrogen production facility directly to an industrial hydrogen user that might need to be or want to be at 100% hydrogen. But if we brought 100% hydrogen to your house, you would need a new furnace. So that's not likely the path forward. We know that there's a whole lot of investment in appliances out there, and we would want to not threaten those.
Okay. We had a question from Mike Weilstein, but I think you've answered it. This is exciting. I've been following kind of hydrogen energy production for more than probably a couple decades. So it's good to hear that it's come to the U.S. I guess that was one of my questions. What countries in Europe are doing the renewable hydrogen?
Yeah, the real leaders are Germany and the Netherlands. I'd say are the farthest along. Denmark, perhaps as well. We went a few of us: Germany, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and France. All 4 of those countries are either leading the way on renewable natural gas or hydrogen, and I would say that it's really Germany and the Netherlands. As you may know about Germany, there's a whole lot of wind resource. They've built it up. They're having some struggles in terms of integrating that wind into the system, and so that's why they've really turned in a big way to hydrogen. Our region might be also a good place with a lot of wind resource, of course, but a lot of hydro resource as well. Might be quite well suited to being a leader in this hydrogen field.
I do have another question. How much of the estimated billion cubic feet available in the state is premised upon having inputs from biomass, such as forestry waste? I get a little concerned when I hear about that because of the fact that I personally don't really want to see us using large acreages to grow rapidly growing trees and cut them down in order to put energy in our pipeline. I'd much rather use true byproduct waste from other enterprises just because of the ecological questions.
Yeah. great questions. You guys have, it feels like you studied this area. There, in the Oregon study, there is a fair amount of the slice that is from, but I'm going to use my words carefully here, ag waste and forest waste. There is no assumption about, a term of art that they use, and many do, of growing fuel crops. Most in the environmental community, and honestly most who are paying attention closely, believe that growing fuel crops is not part of the solution. And I think the careful parsing that will need to be done on a policy side is, I think maybe ag residue is more clear. If you've got a bunch of corn stover and it's going to a landfill, we can do better than that by either putting it into a biodigester. There's a biodigester that's going to be taking ag waste in our region and connecting to our pipeline. So ag residue is ready to go and is a thing. Mm-hmm. Forest waste, certainly as we work to, I'll say, clean up our forests, manage them more carefully, we're going to have forest waste. I think there's always a suspicion or a worry, and I think it's maybe, one that has to get worked through, that if we're taking forest waste, we're going to start cutting trees for that, and there just has to be really good, clear regulation that shows what is forest waste. When we're building stacks of brush and then burning them, that forest waste could be gasified and made into energy. That's not taking down, virgin duck fur. Thank you for the question. I believe almost everyone is standing against growing fuel crops that way. But to your specific question, there is forest and ag residue in the Oregon Department of Energy pie chart.
Well, I would imagine a company like Stahlbusch is already doing that. They already have a biodigester. So are you collaborating with some of those local entities like Stahlbusch and Republic Services and the gas company there at the landfill?
Yeah. Republic for sure, and I'm certainly aware of the Stahlbusch farms biodigester. Other people in the company know more about that. They're not currently hooked up to the gas system. I think they're using much of their gas on site and perhaps making electricity. I'm not sure. Yes. But I know they've been real leaders in how to operate a farm in a way that maximizes their energy production as well as successfully operates their farm. So they have been real leaders.
Great. I hope you will keep us posted on like the eWeb project and other that you're trying in our region. I would really agree with you that the Northwest can be a leader because of our water and wind resources and make better use of what we've already got. Storage is a key issue that's we've got a long ways to go on. But I guess my other comment when you started out talking about that most people know there is a climate problem, as Senator Merkley calls it, climate disruption, from our travels talking to other county commissioners around the state. I think there's still work to do, so I wouldn't assume that everybody's on board, but hopefully we're making progress along those lines. Yeah. But really appreciate the presentation, and I hope to continue to hear from you folks, and because a lot of this is still in the concept phase, and it'd be nice to see actual working projects that we can learn from. But
great, thank you, Chair and Commission. Maybe just one last shout out for weatherizing low-income homes. We couldn't do it without partnering with the counties and with the CAP agencies. That's how that gets done. We provide the resources, but they really provide the know-how. So it's a little perhaps a little less sexy than changing what's in the pipe, but every bit as important, and especially it feels at these times when there's lots of folks who are having trouble paying bills. If we can get those homes to be tighter and more comfortable and safer at the same time, then that's an awesome thing. And we love partnering with these CAP agencies, and they do a great job. So just a shout out to them.
Well, and traditionally that was the most efficient way of saving energy, is to work on the end user, and glad that you're being inclusive in not just the people that can afford to pay extra for something that they support, but getting to the people at the lower ends of the economic spectrum that really need the most help. So I'm glad those folks are on your radar, and looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Great.
And as 3 of the board members for CSC, we appreciate the thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, if there's no more questions, I think the Northwest Natural team can sign off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, not a complete switch here. Quarterly update from the economic development folks. I saw Kate Portia earlier, and Kate is still with us, and there's Jerry. So
Yeah, thank
go,
you.
Go ahead and get going here.
You bet. Thanks so much, Commissioner. And yeah, Jerry Sorty from our team has joined us as well. And I think what I'd like to do is make this pretty brief. In your packet is our report for the third quarter of the 2020-2021 fiscal year. I did note in the memo, I cut this report off at the 15th of March, only because for our office, the pivot to COVID response work began on the 16th of March. And while I recognize that's not the end of the quarter, the thought was that's a logical time in which you're going to see that the current quarter that we're in now is going to be radically different than what this had looked like. So that seemed like a logical spot to stop this report. So, real briefly, even prior to the COVID crisis, and I got to tell you, it was a bit foggy to think back and remember back pre-emergency response what that looked like. But even then, I think you will see we have been making good progress on the business outreach, the business retention expansion work that Jerry has primarily handled. Of course, those numbers are going to go through the roof this next quarter with all the outreach that we've done in response to the crisis. The survey was already complete. We were on task and headed forward with a number of projects. Some of those are coming back onto our plate now because we think they will be a part of the longer-term economic recovery efforts, such as the annexation of the airport industrial park. That's going to be on Jerry's plate to look at and explore as we move forward. I will say that I think when we come back to you, probably in July, to do the closing out of the fiscal year and reporting on that, I think I'm going to need to go through our strategic plan that goes through the following fiscal year and just see there may be some items that we're going to have to change or modify in response to the emergency. And I think, too, our work has shifted. One minor example was we had planned the Made in Benton County tour, right? And we were all going to get on a bus and we were going to go see these amazing manufacturing companies, and that's just not in the cards at this point. So I do want to be transparent about that, though, with you guys as partners. And so my plan is to bring something back in July to look at and make sure we are synced up on the items that our office thinks either we're not going to be able to provide or we'll need to modify, which again, I think are just going to be some of these more group interactions. And then adding in the work that we have done as we've pivoted to emergency emergency response. So we do have some updates on work that's happening now, but before we shift to that, I did just want to pause. Jerry is on also and can answer questions about the work we've done and this third quarter report.
I would just like to say thank you. I really appreciate the ongoing reporting. I guess the most notable thing to me in that report was that you were just revving up to do a lot of the food and beverage cluster work, and that is one of the main casualties of the COVID-19 pandemic, that most of those face-to-face meetings and brainstorming didn't happen, and as a factor of time, I'm assuming that they haven't happened in virtual mode. Do you have a sense for where that might go?
It's an interesting question, and to be totally transparent, I have not thought about what our work plan looks like emerging from this. I think now, as we begin to taper down the EOC, we'll have some bandwidth to look at that. I think those conversations are going to be incredibly important, and they now just have a slightly different flavor with this recovery lens, I guess is how I would say. So I think they were programmed in for the mid part of this calendar year. I think we can look at still getting those going. They may be virtual meetings and Zoom, but that has no less value to still get folks in the room talking. So I see that we'll be able to complete that work, through these first, I would say through this next fiscal year. I think it'll still be able to get done within the 2-year contract period.
I guess my question, we had a AOC legislative committee call yesterday and heard some information from regional solutions folks, and triggered the thought of just how coordinated are your efforts with regional solutions people?
Oh, that's a great question, Commissioner. Thank you for asking. I would say they're incredibly connected. Our office was asked to be part of a group, a small group that was put together by Sarah Means, our regional solutions coordinator for our area. So originally that group was meeting twice weekly. We're at this point meeting weekly and sharing information, which has been incredibly helpful to hear about some of the ideas and work coming out of Lane County. Of course, Lane, they're substantially bigger than us. They've got a lot more resources. But funny, one of the current work items that we're working on is actually the downtown right-of-way, and that's a program Jerry was able to implement and may want to talk about. But that was an idea that came straight out of Lane County, Commissioner, as part of that regional solution. And of course, our partnerships with Lincoln County through the health crisis that they are having, and the work through the EOC and sharing resources is needed with them. So we're certainly well connected, but that might be a nice segue too, Jerry, to have you talk a little bit about the right-of-way program and how that's going as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Several weeks ago now, we knew that when businesses started opening up, coming back from COVID, that everything was going to look different, right? So one thing that we tried to do is look into our toolbox and see what we, starting in the city of Corvallis, could do to support restaurants, which we know were heavily impacted, and also retail businesses as well. So we started looking at opportunities to use right-of-way space, essentially for business use. And we created a program that if people applied for that, they can use up to 4 parking spaces adjacent to their business. So some businesses have a narrow frontage along the right-of-way, and they may only be able to use a couple of parking spaces. But for those that have a little bit more right-of-way, I think you'll see some larger areas blocked off. And so I think we've received 5, 6, 7 applications now in the city of Corvallis from restaurants looking to use right-of-way. And I know that one is at least up and going, and we expect a couple more to start using space eventually. So again, we shifted. We knew that things were going to look different upon reopening, and tried to use the tools that we could. And so a big part of, I think, getting any government program off the ground is like getting it written down and getting some process and procedure in place. And we created a document now that we can share with all communities. And it's kind of just an off-the-shelf program that any city in Benton County or elsewhere, for that matter, could use just to put together a program and get it going. So I think we'll see more businesses start to use this over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully it helps a couple of them.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. And I was going to say, too, I saw our friend Chris Workman's on the call, too, but we forwarded the entire policy application package that we developed out to our rural city managers so that they could have it if they want to duplicate it in their communities as well. And, you know, there's some items they need to change, but hopefully it could be fairly turnkey if it's something that the rural communities want to utilize as well.
And Jerry, when you talk about right of way, is that parking like out in front of the business? Is that the main thing that would qualify as right of way?
Yeah, it's right of way, but it's also in the program, the Corvallis program. It also includes city-owned parking lots. So right of way in terms of like street area as well as city-owned parking lots.
Great.
I don't know if you guys saw the Register Guard article, but in the Register Guard deemed Eugene's to be streeteries, like an eatery, but it's a streetery, which we thought was pretty clever. I will say, too, Jerry and our partners at DCA and the businesses garnered a fair amount of positive press, not just in our newspapers here locally, but KEZI and KVEL also came down and covered this, which any media that we can get for our businesses at this point is a win, right? So we were really excited about that.
Any free media?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And with that, there are permits required from the city or whatever the jurisdiction is. Is that correct? And is that on track at this point?
It is. So we, like internally at the City of Corvallis, we had a really great partnership with Public Works, Community Development, and the Fire Department to help get the program off the ground. And we're able, I think, to anticipate some of the main questions that would come up upon permit review. And so now there's a permit that can be emailed in to our Public Works Department. And Lisa Scherf is turning those around in about a day for a complete application. One business day turnaround is pretty awesome. And sometimes there's a little bit of follow-up that needs to happen and, special circumstances that take a little bit of extra time, but a day to a couple of days is going pretty quickly. And those are free permits.
All right. Any other?
Nothing about that, but I do want to bring up the broadband matching dollars.
Okay. Is this an appropriate time to talk about broadband, Kate, or?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I had a couple other items on current work processes as well.
Okay.
But yeah, broadband's a great one to jump into.
Okay. And I want to acknowledge that Catherine Duvall is out there somewhere as well, and she's been working on our local broadband action team and have been involved in all of these collaborative calls that we've had with Lincoln County, some folks from Lane County, and hopefully Lynn County as well. The objective here is to put together a proposal to the Economic Development Administration for technical assistance dollars in order to do a feasibility study for providing broadband for areas with no service and improving broadband for especially rural areas that are underserved, and then to also extend that feasibility study into Corvallis to address whether we can improve broadband here so that we can have the potential for businesses that have high demand for connectivity. So the request to the county is for a 20% match. The estimate of the feasibility study for us, including Corvallis geography, is $73,000. So we're looking at $15,000 in match. And the city has said that they would put in some funds. My understanding is that that was $2,000 to $4,000. And Mary and Joe, in looking at our budgets, have said that they are willing to put in up to $15,000. So I think we're well covered. And at this point, the only thing that we wanted to have was a record of the board's support. So a vote to support up to $15,000 in match for this feasibility study for the EDA proposal. This is on a fast track, and so I will get a draft of this proposal later this week, and we'll review it with Adam Lertz from IT and with Mary Otley, and have Vance take a look at it so that we can get that out the door to the Economic Development Administration, because the funds are all first come, first serve. And we're just slightly ahead of the curve, and we're very eager to make sure that we do get the funds for our region. But if you have any questions, please.
No, it's something we've been talking about for years, and I think the timing's right.
Excellent.
And our region is Lynn, Benton, Lincoln.
For the purposes of this proposal, it's basically, we're looking at the Cascades West Economic Development District region, which is the EDA region for us. That includes Lane County as well.
Oh, okay.
And Lane County is very excited about the prospect. Lynn County is the one that we've had a little bit harder time bringing into the discussion. Hopefully they will become more involved moving forward. Their IT department is engaged. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other comments from your end, Kate or Catherine?
Well, I think from my end, I would say we're excited to be a part of this. I think that the most exciting part that you missed, Van, is your acronym for the team. They're the BAT team, which is awesome, right? So there's that. The other item I would say is, of course, this item was always of interest to our office, but I think it is especially important to have this conversation about broadband. Now that we're not just talking about faster streaming speeds, we're talking about kids having access to learning, right? I mean, it is now a fundamental need as we look at next year's school year, with the potential that kids are going to be half-time still at home. So the timing is wonderful, and the opportunity to leverage these federal dollars is great. So we're happy to be putting in some money to help out with this as well.
The other point on that front with respect to education and telehealth is that there are some state dollars as well to help with immediate need, but those dollars need to be making a difference by September, and that's a very tall order. So we will be working with the local internet service providers as this regional group as well, to see if there are some real quick fix solutions to try to fill some of those gaps on a stopgap basis. And I did see the note from School Board Chair Sammy Alabraba about the schools, and I think that, like Corvallis School District, all the school districts are really interested in this proposal. So I would put forth a motion that we provide up to $15,000 in matching funds for this Economic Development Administration Technical Assistance Grant.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And then you'll get us details.
Yes.
All right. I guess one question, a couple weeks ago, there was the broadband call, and I remember Consumer Power was mentioned as being an interested party in delivering helping with this effort. Do you know what their interest is, or timetable, and how that might fit in with the proposal?
I can tell you that Consumer Power and Peak are working together, and they are one of the two ISPs here in the Benton County area that are involved in these discussions now. And it's Mike Corwin from the Cascades West Council of Governments and the Economic Development Office there that is coordinating with those folks in the local area. So from Benton County, the folks that have been most engaged, or that are taking the lead, it's Mike Corwin, Catherine Duvall from the Economic Development Office, Adam Lertz from IT, and then I've been the elected lead.
Okay, great. All right, why don't you go ahead, Kate, and if there's any more on broadband, do that, and then you had a couple points to finish up.
You bet. You bet. Nothing else on broadband, but just three last very quick items, as I know you guys need to get on with your other agenda. Joe had asked that I mention as an update that he is working on setting a meeting for Caroline Cummings from Oregon Rain himself and me to sit down and just take a look at a couple of components of their contract and have a face-to-face meeting, or it'll probably be virtual, but a meeting with the three of us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So he is working on that. That's the update I have there. Our back to business videos continue. Nissa from our team and Catherine just shot another one yesterday, and they are reaching out to our partners in the rural communities as well, including some restaurants down in Monroe, and then we're working with Shelley Neiman, the chamber director in Philomath, to see if there's some businesses in Philomath that we could go shoot at. Again, this is just an opportunity to share best practices from businesses in a short, easy to view way, and maybe to give the businesses a little promotion as well. So if you guys know somebody who is doing something creative or clever that they'd like to share, please have them get in contact with us, and we'd be happy to reach out to them and feature them in one of these videos. They've been very, very well received. And finally, I think I told you guys last time, but the Business Oregon Phase 2 funds are out, and our partners at Community Lending Works did receive an allotment that will be available for Benton County. It's $75,000 total funding, with $25,000 earmarked for Corvallis. They are finalizing the procedures for this fund. Because it's such a small amount and there's been such a high demand, we had a meeting and chatted about this. The application is a little bit onerous. It's maybe an hour and a half for businesses to fill out. And our partners, props to Community Lending Works / Dev Northwest. They were very thoughtful about this. And again, not formalized yet, but I think the procedure that they're going to use, which we fully supported, was where they're actually going to do a very short form to express interest, and then they will do a lottery at that early spot, so that not every business is having to spend an hour and a half on an application that they have potentially a very slim chance of getting a yes. So rather almost an application lottery. Then if folks get past that initial lottery, then they'll have them fill out the full form, do the screening, and move them forward. Really, those funds should be getting going in the next week or two, so I'll keep you guys updated as to where we're at. We're very excited to get those monies out in communities. And again, this was a focus on rural minority businesses, but also our sole proprietors. There's some specific goals related to sole proprietors and our very small businesses. So stay tuned for more details on that as we finalize it. But that is everything we have for you this morning.
Along those lines, do you have any early report on the first round of funding that was, I guess, completed in or got out the door in May?
Oh, our loans?
Correct.
The Benton County loans that they did. Well, they've gotten the funds out the door, and I think I had let you know. I don't have it here at my fingertips, but we did meet the goals that you guys had set in terms of percentages of minority-owned businesses. I want to recall that was about 33%, and then 25% rural businesses in the rural parts of the county. So those funds are out the door to those businesses. I haven't heard back, but I certainly can ask Emily for an update to see how folks are doing on those.
Well, maybe in your July report you can have more information, and I'm just curious. I know you worked hard on that, fast and furious, and getting the applications, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of our approach, your approach, and on this second round, as a small business person that's filled out lots of forms, I appreciate that the consideration of make an application that's relatively painless, and then if you survive that process, then dig into the heavy-duty application form. So that was, I appreciate the creativity on getting making it as painless as possible to apply for some of these funds. So So
You bet.
appreciate that. Any more questions for Kate and her team? Okay. Well, really appreciate your efforts. I know you've been scrambling for and I think entirely appropriate to cut off the third quarter report at March 15th, because that's about when all our lives changed to 1 degree or more. And it makes sense that before COVID and after COVID, and that's how I remember March. So I think that was a good way to break up the report for us. So if there's nothing else, we'll talk to you again soon. And thank you for all your efforts and scrambling to keep up with a very fluid situation that we're all dealing with.
Of course, we're very happy and proud to be doing this work for you guys. But thank you. I'll pop back on later when we get back on EOC items. But thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're not too bad here. Item 5.3, introduction of risk map for updating floodplain. We have Toby Lewis, who I think is with us here, and then David Rattay from FEMA. So Toby, if you're ready, go ahead. I see the slide starting up, so take it away.
Oops, okay. Am I talking loud enough?
You are.
No, yeah.
Yep.
But, okay. Okay, so David Rattay from FEMA Region 10 is going to be doing most of this presentation. Just quick to start off, FEMA Region 10 has been working on doing a series of updates to the flood insurance rate maps. The current project is for the upper Willamette River watershed area, and this is the initial kickoff meeting, and then there'll be some follow-up meetings with specific staff, and then as we move through the process, which will take several years, we'll also be providing updates to the board as things progress. So.
All right. So are we waiting for David?
He's right. He's here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do a quick sound check.
You're doing fine.
Folks hear me?
Yep.
And I understand the screen share should be coming through, correct?
It is.
It is.
All right, let's get started. So good morning once again. My name is David Rattay. I'm an engineer with FEMA Region 10, and I oversee our flood insurance study production work in the state of Oregon. And this is a kickoff call, so Toby described, for a risk map project. And risk map is a program that's been around for 7 or 8 years. It's been evolving over time. And the MAP, the risk map, is actually an acronym. M for mapping, A for assessment, and P for planning. With this program, we're looking to integrate a number of disciplines under the FEMA umbrella, especially in mitigation, including mitigation planning, hazard mitigation assistance, floodplain management, and the National Flood Insurance Program, and emergency management. It's an opportunity to collaborate to acquire and develop credible data, raise awareness of risks from natural hazards, and determine next steps to develop plans to address those risks and reduce exposure to hazards. So through this initial phase that we call discovery, we're trying to identify what are the needs so that we can then plan the necessary funding that we'll need to secure from our headquarters office over the next few years. And that can include funding for flood insurance study updates, for natural natural hazard risk assessments, and mitigation strategies. And of course, this is in what we call peacetime, no current events, I guess, outside of COVID-19. We also look at identifying outreach needs and training opportunities. So we really want to identify the data gaps, the priorities that the county and the cities have, and also identify partners so that we can go on to our next step and scope out additional work. So a key question for the county and the cities is the timing good for the county and the cities? Obviously, there's a lot of things going on. We understand a lot of communities are limited in resources, mainly speaking of personnel. So if the timing is not the best time and the county and the cities want to wait, we want to understand that so that we can plan accordingly. If the timing is good, then we want to make sure we have your buy-in, that you understand what this process is about and you're interested to support it. So the primary focus for this risk map project, at least in this initial stage, will include, will reflect a flood hazard focus. We want to look at opportunities to update the flood hazard information countywide and throughout the watershed. And but we'll also look at opportunities to include discussions and even funding of development of all hazard or hazards that are of interest, I should say, to the county and the cities through this process. So I don't have a formal presentation. I am going to bring up some different documents that you can review at your leisure. The first I have on the screen is our webpage on this program, the Risk Map program. And there's a lot of background information here. In addition, we included a discovery and view fact sheet that might be helpful to understand a lot of the key objectives, process, especially for this discovery phase. So if we've had an opportunity to take a look at that. And I also want to bring your attention to the project work map. So the watershed footprint, I don't know if people can see my cursor or not.
I can see it.
Primarily in this purple line. And then this is the watershed boundary on the west side. We have decided early on with this project planning to include the remainder of Benton County. And we'll work with the other counties on what might be best for those counties as well. But we're directed to start our studies focusing on a watershed at the Huck 8 level, and that's why we selected this footprint. The Alsea watershed, as I'll talk about a little bit later, we've actually already have shared some data with the county. So given this format, I want to take an opportunity to introduce some team members that I believe are listening in. If they're not, they certainly will be involved at different steps of the process. So we work very closely with state partners, including Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, Celinda Adair. We also work closely with the Oregon Office of Emergency Management, Amy Bachant and Joseph Murray. Indugami is a very big partner of ours, especially in looking at other hazards or risk assessments of hazards. And Christina Appleby is our point of contact with Indugami. Part of this project, in this early stage and maybe some of the later stages, we've partnered with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So Paul Scofani might be listening in. And in FEMA, as a federal agency, we have a lot of contract support. We have Resilience Action Partners supporting putting together this meeting and some of the follow-up touch points that will be coming up very soon. And also our contractor STAR 2 working on the technical side with the maps and the data. And then lastly with me from FEMA, there's a number of colleagues, Ren Lamb, Wendy Shaw, Roxanne Pilkington, and Aaron Cooper, all supporting this project in one way or another. This is meant to be informal. Before I move on to why now, I want to see if there might be any initial questions. If not, I'll continue.
I've got an easy one. You mentioned, I think, Tagami. Could you translate that?
Tagami is Department of Geology and Mineral Industries.
Okay, thank you.
They do a lot of work with LIDAR, landslide hazards, seismic risk, flood hazard risk assessments, a lot of mapping pieces, especially on the all hazard side of things.
They also deal with quarries.
Sure.
Yeah, licensing of quarries.
Okay, thank you.
The one out by your place, we
Okay.
spent months on.
I'm sorry, was there an additional question?
That was just an aside comment.
Oh, okay, I missed that. So I want to talk a little bit about why now and some of the data that we have at this point. So this area has been requested for flood insurance study updates for a number of years, especially from Benton County. That's a key consideration and why now. We've done some work in the upper portion of the watershed, Coast Fork and Middle Fork. That's winding down, in Lane County. We also are able to leverage some data that have been put together and we'll be sharing very soon. We're wrapping up the internal reviews. And that data is base level engineering analysis. And I have a figure to help me describe that. So I'm going to get a little bit technical. I'm going to try and keep this high level. But base level engineering analysis, and I think we've included a fact sheet in the past. There's also a website I'll pull up here shortly. Reflects a semi-automated approach to engineering analysis to derive flood hazard information, mainly water surface elevations that are then mapped against terrain data to create the flood insurance or flood maps. And the approach that we've taken in Region 10 differs from other approaches used throughout the country. We wanted to enhance it a couple of levels. So this level A is the out-of-the-box, fully automated approach that a number of regions are using. If you find some information online, it's going to mainly speak to that approach. Because we want these data sets to be more ready to move forward with mapping updates, we've updated it to be prepared to add in structure information, such as culverts and bridges, and then also include a lot of these engineering elements that I've checked off here in the boxes. This is more for background information, so that if you learn or obtain information about base level engineering, maybe from a national perspective, there are some differences. And I think the website I have here is a FEMA website, open to everyone, of course, that has a number of fact sheets on base level engineering, These were customized for Region 6, so down in Texas and in that part of the country. So a lot of the links that are in there will take you to Region 6's data and information. So we've shared some base level engineering analysis previously in Benton County with a viewer that is open to anyone. But because these are draft data sets, we encourage to work with the communities, the county and the cities before we share it with the public. Mainly because they are subject to change with additional refinements, maybe with some limitations of the modeling that we'll talk about in some of our follow-up calls. But in some cases, it may be relevant or pertinent to share with property owners, developers, because it does reflect best available data. This is the home page for the Oregon statewide viewer for base level engineering analysis that was completed about a year and a half ago. And our intent is to update this website as we acquire additional data. So if we look at the Benton County piece of the Alsea watershed, these are the data sets that we've shared previously. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this today unless there are questions, but I just wanted to bring it up for reference. So we've done some base level engineering analysis affecting part of Benton County and have shared that, and actually Toby and others with the county have provided some feedback. We definitely appreciate that. Let's see, index, scope maps. So I apologize, I think I mixed up some of the attachments. I'm going to use this attachment that's not in the collection. The two figures that are in the collection of documents is the same figure, just zoomed in to the north and the south. And I can pull those up as well. So I wanted to speak to the base level engineering analysis that is wrapping up the draft data. And we intend to share that probably by the end of this week or early next week. Now it's going through our internal review. The line work that's shown on this figure reflects the work that's wrapping up. We already talked about Alsea down here in the southwest corner. The orange line work elsewhere in the county is where we'll have additional base level engineering analysis. As I mentioned, we'll be sharing here very soon. The line work in the blue, including this portion down here, these are reaches that we could not include in the base level engineering analysis, either due to complex flooding characteristics or because of current effective studies that are at a detailed level. So base level engineering is only used for approximate studies. Detailed is as the name implies, reflects additional data collection, field survey collection, and more engineering analysis to complete. Whereas the base level, I think I failed to mention this on the previous slide, is all based on LiDAR terrain. Does not include the culverts and bridges, I think I mentioned. But it also doesn't include the underwater bathymetry. So for deep channels where we are underestimating the conveyance capacity, and that might be something we want to refine for smaller channels, because it's based on water surface elevations at the time of the LiDAR collection, the terrain data collection, probably are very accurate. But the important note is it's deemed best available because previous analysis or previous mapping for these approximate Zone A reaches reflected no engineering analysis for the most part. They may have reflected historic events, soils conditions, those types of factors were put into the delineation of flood hazards for approximate mapping in the past. we'll just zoom in. This is the north portion. So the blue lines is what we'll be talking about in terms of scoping out additional work. Orange line work is where we'll be talking about where do we need to refine the base level engineering analysis due to some of the modeling limitations, due to lack of structures or other factors that may make it not as credible as it should be.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Just struggling a little bit to understand. So the all of the orange reaches basically is where you have preliminary base level engineering data based on the LiDAR. And so we want to talk about how we want to refine that as the next step moving ahead. And the blue line, you've said two things now, where we want to possibly do additional work, or where, but I also heard you say that some of those stream reaches are just too complex, or there's already better data. So I'm a little confused about the blue line.
Please, yes, I'll definitely clarify. So the blue lines reflect a couple categories. One is current approximate level studies or mapping that we cannot include in the base level engineering analysis due to complex conditions such as branch graded flows, breakouts, those sorts of things. And you'll see a lot of that along the main stem of the Willamette. And then the other factor is current detailed studies. So the base level engineering is meant to only, when I use the word replace, that's the word I'm thinking of, in terms of best available data for approximate studies, but it can't substitute detailed without meeting that same level that a detailed study requires, such as field survey. So that's why it's an initial first cut. In some cases we do, for continuity, run the base level engineering over detailed reaches just for comparison. But it cannot replace the detailed as best available data because of the nature of approximate versus detailed.
Yeah, and I can understand the channel complexity issues. And yeah.
But David, can I just jump in real quick and mention that the areas that are, or quick clarification, the areas that are being identified as approximate areas mean that there's a flood hazard area mapped already, but there's no base flood elevations identified on the map. And the detailed areas mean that that FEMA has already identified base flood elevations for those areas. Is that correct, David?
That is absolutely correct. And one key note to add that really helps floodplain management is that the new analysis for the Zone A, even though we're not able to publish base flood elevations on the map or in the report, we'll be providing the county and cities with data sets that will allow you either to use with your GIS systems or these types of viewers or your GIS. Basically point and click, identify a base flood elevation at any given point. The way the viewer is currently set, I can demonstrate this real quickly. Might take a second to load. So we don't have a point and click feature. It's just a product that we would talk about developing later. We do have the cross section, so you can point and click the cross section, and we have screen space here. Can't move these go-to things. Okay, there. And then pull down the information. Where is it? Oh, change the line. Okay. So yeah, water surface elevation. So that would be the base flood elevation because we're talking about the 1% event in this case for this mapping, 266.3 feet at that cross section. So you don't have that information with current Zone A flood insurance rate maps. You won't have that on the new map, but you'll have all this underlying data that you can leverage.
As a former Watershed Council coordinator, I greatly appreciate this level of data. It would make restoration work and any kind of construction work in these areas much, much more straightforward when you have better information.
And this is just the beginning. On our follow-up call, or on some of the final steps of this discovery process, maybe on our next call, we'll talk about other products that we will, that are standard, that we'll develop regardless of county interest and city interest, and then other products that we can potentially add on if they might be useful to the local jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
David, before you switch away from that screen, I just wanted to point out that the gray shading that you're seeing on the screen, that is the currently mapped flood hazard area. The blue shading is what the base level engineering data is showing is probably a more accurate or better representation of what that flood hazard area should be mapped as.
So Toby, in some cases, the base level engineering is showing a narrower flood hazard area, and in other cases it's broader. It's not one or the other.
Correct.
And that's pretty much expected.
Yeah.
Two key components: one, engineering base; two, much better terrain data.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we come up with the same elevation as the effective, or more or less, because we don't necessarily have elevations, the extent, because of the terrain, much greater resolution and accuracy of the terrain data will provide a lot more detail in the mapping. And then this reach where you don't have any blue, I believe that must be a detailed reach that was not part of the base level engineering, or at least not published in this map.
Yeah, there's detailed information for that area.
So very shortly we'll be sharing a similar viewer, separate viewer just for the Upper Willamette project, with very similar, identical symbology. And then we'll talk about these on some of the upcoming calls. Which actually leads me to, I guess, the final topic before we open up for more questions, and that's the process. Let me pull up the class. So it is a multi-year process for the full risk map project cycle. Obviously, we're here in step 2, the discovery meeting. We're preparing for the discovery meeting. And I'll talk about that first. So following the kickoff call, we're already working with jurisdictions to set up what we call listening sessions or information exchange sessions. We want to have an opportunity to share what we've collected to this point, gather additional input and feedback, whether it pertains to the flood study data, different needs, and also touch on the other hazards as well. We want to use these sessions to hopefully have a better understanding of the county and the city's priorities. Then we'll use that information, we'll document it in notes, and at some point in time, remains a bit uncertain what the timing might look like and the format. We'll want to do a follow-up meeting, essentially in person, depends on the situation obviously. Right now, I think everyone understands we're not able to travel for non-essential, non-mission essential purposes, so we're doing everything virtually. So I'm going to expect most likely we'll still be in a virtual format. Most likely we'll want to, if we're doing a virtual format, have separate meetings by county, or at least some type of breakout approach by county. And this is a discovery meeting, a discovery workshop. We'll hopefully use some exercises to interact with the maps and the data, make sure we clearly identified information from these listening sessions. And depending on the timing of that, we may have some additional touch points. As explained to Toby before, we do have a limited window if we want to try and fund additional engineering analysis with our next funding cycle. We'd like to have final input and thumbs up on what we're planning to do by September. So that discovery meeting is delayed to August or September. We might want to have an additional touch point if we don't have an opportunity to capture all the information in the listening sessions to make sure we understand each other on priorities and scoping needs, specifically for the flood insurance study update. So after the discovery meeting, whether that's August, September, or sometime thereafter, we'll put together a discovery report, draft initially, and send that out to the local participants for review, comment, and feedback. We'll make those revisions as necessary, and then finalize the discovery report that will document this first phase of the process. Then, depending on, as I mentioned, timing, we're hoping that we can fund some additional work in our 2021 plan. We currently have some placeholders there in our draft plan, and we'll look at refining. I should point out, I'll go back to the map. Studying this entire watershed, especially if we're looking at expanding other counties, countywide, I don't think we're going to have the resources to do all of that in one funding cycle. I'm almost certain we'll have to phase it. So that could affect timing as well. So once we have a better understanding of the scoping requirements, we'll look to secure the funds and the partners that will be involved with data collection, development, and analysis. So that could spur off into new regulatory flood insurance study process or non-regulatory supplemental risk assessments. And this could be flood or, as I mentioned, getting into other hazards. And we are aware that the county local hazard mitigation plan, I believe, expires in next year. Some counties are 23. I think Benton County's next year. So we might not be able to meet that window, but it's something to think about perhaps with a mid-cycle update or future updates. But obviously any data that we have to this point or in the next, 6 months, whatever your timing is, you certainly could incorporate that. So moving further down this curve with the flood insurance study update, we have additional touch points compared to past updates. And I think the past update in the county, I didn't write down that in my notes, but I think it concluded around 2009 or 10, roughly that time frame. So it has been a while. And the process has changed since our previous program. We do have additional touch points. One, we'll send out quarterly updates once work is funded, just providing you a quick overview. And when we have draft data, there's a couple opportunities. If there's interest to see and review different subsets like hydrology, we can certainly make that available as we proceed. But we'll use a flood risk review meeting, step number 4, to review draft maps using the viewer, the GIS, prior to moving forward with preliminary maps that would be released to the public for the public due process and appeal period, comment period, usually some outreach. So this is another opportunity. So you have a few opportunities. You can review the BLE and provide feedback on these upcoming calls and touch points, and then you'll have another opportunity to review draft maps at the flood risk review meeting and provide feedback. Once we resolved any comments or concerns, and of course, if it requires more or updated engineering analysis, we will look to secure those additional funds and complete that and revise the draft map. So that could be a iterative process if needed. But once we pass that point, we're able to issue preliminary flood insurance rate maps and a preliminary flood insurance study report that's available for the public and everyone to review and provide comments, and we'll have an official 90-day appeal period. So when that's released, we'll have a consultation coordination officers meeting to discuss the preliminary maps. Ideally, we've already hashed out all the engineering and mapping concerns, and then we'll focus on the public outreach and due process as well as the adoption phase. And we'll work with the county and the cities on supporting that public outreach. Most like in the past, it's been an open house. We're not sure how that's going to look in some projects like the Lane County project I mentioned. We're at this stage right now where we're trying to approach a public meeting for that Coast Fork study, and we'll have to decide what that's going to look like. Because, even if we're in a position to be able to hold an open house in person with social distancing, with maybe lower turnouts, we'll want to look at other approaches. And then after the public meeting, we move forward with finalizing the flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study. There's an adoption phase that the county and cities will have to update your local floodplain management or local floodplain ordinances to reflect the updated maps, as well as any other changes or requirements in the ordinance under the National Flood Insurance Program. So step 7 is a resilience meeting or workshop. This could actually occur any time in this 5+ year project life cycle. It's something that once we hear back from the county in terms of what's the best timing, whether it's a future plan update or other activities, or maybe it's focusing on specific mitigation projects, we can, as long as we have that lead time, obviously, to secure the funding for contract support and so forth, and we can manage it in our workload, we'll meet you at where needed. But the purpose of that resilience meeting is really to connect the dots from all this data that we're going to create and how it can be leveraged for advancing mitigation projects and actions, whether it's land use planning, culvert upgrades, bridge replacements, and trying to determine, one, what additional data or analysis we might be able to do to support that, such as running from the engineering side as an engineer the different project scenarios, to looking at how to connect to resources at the FEMA or other federal agencies in securing funds for mitigation projects.
Can I ask one question there? In terms of mitigation projects, another type would also possibly be land acquisition for a natural area or park, just to allow for natural river processes?
I certainly believe that's eligible. We're getting outside of my area of expertise. We're getting more into the hazard mitigation assistance folks and the state hazard mitigation officer. So maybe that's something we can talk about on a follow-up call.
Okay.
I think a key component for mitigation projects under HMA will be that cost-benefit analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So comparing the ratio of the cost to the economic value of the benefits. And of course, funding. That's always a challenge, available funding.
Okay.
And number 8, the final goal is achieving resilience, advancing a mitigation objective or activity, action to a point where that funding is secured, and if it's a project, it's underway, completed, or a plan update, or whatever the case, working together to achieve resilience so that your community is better prepared for future flood events or other types of disasters. That's the goal of this program and this process.
Okay.
So that concludes everything I had to cover. Check to see if there are any other questions. So we are, I think I did miss, we are trying to schedule these listening sessions over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We want to wrap up those calls by July 10th. I believe coordination is ongoing to get those on the calendar. And I believe we're going to break that up by different groupings with the city. So those should be popping up on people's calendars pretty soon.
So, just to clarify, the listening sessions are going to be with the cities within the Benton County boundary and with other interested stakeholders as well, but kind of on a city-by-city or area-by-area basis?
I didn't write down the groupings in my notes. I believe we're doing a separate one for Corvallis. I think we're combining Adair Village and Monroe. In Benton County, maybe participating in all of them. I don't recall, but yeah, that's the approach. Is to have one-on-one meetings with some groupings, so that we can have more detailed discussions about needs for each city, each jurisdiction, and of course external stakeholders such as flood districts. We would certainly encourage you to invite those stakeholders to those listening sessions.
Watershed Council, Soil and Water Conservation District.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for David? All right.
I do
David,
have another
this
question.
Okay.
This
Sam?
is Gordon Kurtz with Public Works Engineering, and I had where am I going to find the PDF that you had that outlines the process through which you walked us? I was looking online.
It's in our packet, Gordon, for the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think this one's online. This was a Region 10 document, not a national document.
Okay, thanks.
I guess in terms of additional analyses or specific projects, I'm still grappling to understand what those might look like, but I'm assuming that we would be very interested in having better analysis beyond just the LIDAR and HECRAS for bridges and major culverts that we need to maintain.
Right.
And overall, I just want to express support. I think that this work will reduce the engineering costs for all of our permit applicants and definitely reduce flood risk as well by improving prediction. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the project unfolds.
So is this a good timing for the county to continue with this process and try and see if we can get some funding secured for 21 to start this work?
Personally, I think so, but I think that that's really a good question for our staff, for both Gordon and for Toby, as well as our leads at Public Works, Gary Stoffer, and at Community Development, Greg Verrett. It depends on how much of our staff time it's going to take.
Yeah, that was my question in our packet. We had a line about the only expected fiscal impact is occasional amounts of staff time for follow-up meetings. And I guess I would call on staff if they have any thoughts at this time to let us know what you think. So we could maybe start with Toby and Community Development.
So I've talked with Greg about the project and the conversations that I've had with David Ratte over the last month or so. And Greg is on board with working on the project and moving forward with it. He feels like it would be a good time, that we can manage the time commitment.
I think there's never a good time as part of the answer, correct? So, yeah, I think that I think that we strike now while we have attention from FEMA and move ahead. That's my personal feeling.
Okay, are there any other staff comments on this project? Sounds quiet. Any further questions for David? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. A lot of, you managed to go over quite a bit of material and even catch up a little on our schedule, so we appreciate that, and we'll look forward to finding out community meetings that will be popping up here in the next several weeks. So,
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this might be a wonderful time for a break.
I think so.
And we will start back up by 11 o'clock. So
Looks like we need
stay
to put
tuned.
batteries in the clock.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Okay. Welcome back. We will resume our work session. Let's see. Next up is the Mental Health Addiction and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Committee. Danielle, are you ready to go?
Yes, hi, good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So these conversations were happening prior to me being here and when Mitch was still Behavioral Health Director. We were having discussions around the necessity to continue the Mental Health Addictions and Developmental Diversity Advisory Committee. That committee has struggled with a little bit of an identity crisis because the contract with Oregon Health Authority and with the CCOs is now much more descriptive and directive than it was when the rule was written that required the advisory committee. So the rule is still written to require the advisory committee. Like I said, we've continued to struggle with an identity. We do have a good small group of individuals now who are committee members, and we have a couple of new applications, but we wanted to talk with the three of you about directions for that advisory committee, or what your impressions were of how to move that advisory committee forward in a useful manner and a thoughtful way before we appointed new committee members. I think the committee is down to, I want to say 6 or 7 members at this point. It's dwindled quite a bit over the last 18 months to 2 years, both with people just their terms expiring and not renewing, and with limited applications for new members. So wanting to have a conversation about how to move that forward, if we just move forward with it as it sits now, and review those. I think there's 2 or 3 applications that have come through, and discuss appointing those individuals to the committee as official committee members.
Well, there's 2 ways of looking at it, I think, Danielle. One is looking at, reviewing what the roles of the committee is first. The other one is, I suppose, having new members on it might inform that process. On the other hand, it might confuse the process as well. So I think it's just kind of maybe looking at, you say we have how many still on the committee?
I think there's 7 right now.
And have they been on there a long time? You know, I haven't seen the list lately, so I don't know what the terms are.
Yeah, so the terms are 2. You can have 2 3-year terms. Most of our committee members are about in the end of their first term or beginning of their second term.
Okay.
So Danielle, I think the question for me is, I know that when committees struggle and they don't feel like they're making a substantive contribution, it's why bother? Once upon a time, this committee had actual decision-making role about some of the funding decisions that we made.
Correct.
And since that's no longer the case, it doesn't feel as substantive. So and it's also a huge, broad swath.
Yeah.
I mean, with developmental diversity, addictions, mental health. So I would also think it would be difficult just in terms of focus. So what would be useful, or how would we best use an advisory body that focused on these issues?
So Commissioner, that's a great question. I think what has happened is there was a decision made to combine all of these committees rather than having 2 or 3 disparate committees. There was a decision made a number of years ago to combine them all into one, and I think that has created part of the identity crisis because there are members of the committee who are very focused on DD. There are members of the community who are very focused on mental health. Addictions kind of gets lost in the middle a little bit. So I think that's been part of the struggle, is just those really different ideals. Those systems are very separate. They are very different. I mean, even to the point where they're overseen in the state by different departments.
Yeah.
So I think that's been part of the struggle, is thoughtfully splitting the time between the 3 populations, and really not, my opinion is really not doing any of them any favor, because there just isn't enough time in the hour and 15-minute meeting we have once a month to really have a thoughtful discussion about any of those populations without the others feeling like they're being left out.
And 3 committees would take 3 times the staffing, which is a
Agreed.
scarce resource. And it's just the mental health component that still is a kind of a leftover mandated component?
The DD component is also still required.
Okay.
Also, this committee,
So both,
this committee has been in existence through four or more directors at the health department. So that's
right.
That's part of the issue too, in terms of how each director defined it and what the expectations were. I think with you and Charlie, there's a unique opportunity to look at that structure, and see how we could best provide the incentives for looking at the issues. If we're going to keep it as one whole committee, how do we incentivize it to have its focus areas?
The other issue that we've struggled with is both in the certification reviews for mental health and for DD. Both programs have received feedback from their certification agencies indicating that where MADAC checks the box, it doesn't really serve the need of either program. So, I don't know if we want to have, we want to consider splitting them. I agree with Commissioner Ojero that creates more time crunch for programs, but I also think it's a disservice to the programs to have it kind of squished into 1 hour and 15-minute committee meeting a month, and feel like that we're spending enough time on any of those topics.
So if we were to split it out, so there's mental health and we'll just call it behavioral health over here, and then developmental diversity as a separate committee, then the DD component would be staffed out of that office rather than yours, and they'd be able to focus much more closely on issues that are relevant to the developmental diversity program and community. And there's nothing says that everyone has to meet once a month. It could be every other month too, and thereby lighten the load. And that would be one way I would look at it.
Well,
I think that makes good sense. Sorry, Commissioner Malone, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to follow up on Annabelle's comment of this arrangement has been through 4 health department directors. Does it make sense to kind of work on the idea of how to rearrange things, but leave things open so the new director can have some input.
It might, and on the other hand, it would be one of those things that might not, a new director wouldn't necessarily prioritize and might not get to for a year or two.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a nagging problem, and it's been a nagging problem ever since I've been on this board.
It has been.
So I think that we would be better off actually resolving the issue and making the committees more meaningful and functional now.
Right. It's also confusing, when we're talking about this issue, that acronym is terrible. MADAC.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
I think it's hard even for members to describe what it is they're there for.
Yes, I agree. And we do have a group of really dedicated members right
You
now.
do, yeah.
But I do think that having all of that squished into one committee has just provided so many complications to the whole programming.
Yep.
Well, it sounds like people are not satisfied with the current structure, so seems like it would be worthwhile to figure out the best way to split up this committee, meeting times, who's staffing it, and then I guess get back to us on your proposal. Seems like there's pretty good agreement that the current structure is not working, so I can see maybe even having a couple proposals for moving forward, but definitely change the current structure.
Okay. I would really like to get the committee members' feedback on this.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We haven't had this conversation as a committee. I wanted to speak with you all before I broached that subject with the committee members. So we definitely can have that conversation when we meet the first week of July and see what feedback we get from those individuals.
I think it's important to empower them to be part of that conversation and saying, we're interested in their participation and how do they see this working better? Would it work better, in two committees, whatever? But give them an opportunity to weigh in on the process.
And is your intention to invite potential new committee members to this discussion?
I think I would leave it with the active members that we have. We do have the 2 or 3 people that have applied for membership have continued to participate as visitors. They likely will be at the meeting in July, so I would welcome their input as well, because they've been participating for a number of months. They, of course, wouldn't have a vote. They aren't voting members, but I think their input would be valuable, given the participation that they've been engaged with.
Well, and that gives you a little broader representation and viewpoints than your current membership. So I think that makes sense. Is this enough direction for you to move forward?
It is, yes. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
And I guess a question for you. We have the discussion of our insurance situation, and then consent calendar, which is quick, and then will you be joining us on the EOC report?
Yes, I will. I'm going to hang on the line until we get to that section.
Okay, appreciate that, and we will move things along as quickly as we can here, but stay tuned. And next up is discussion and approve renewal of our 2021 property liability and workers' comp insurance policy. So I see Steve Erlings is with us and Mary Otley. So I'm not sure how you want to start off, but I think one of you is up.
Yeah, I'll start. Good morning.
Good morning, Mary.
And well, tell us about our insurance renewal. Also joining us is Deidre from Bark Erling, or whatever your new name is. And Jane Stevers. Jane is new. You've seen her a couple times, and Jane is the one that actually compiled all the information for the renewal. So that was one of her first jobs upon being hired. She learned a lot about our insurances very quickly, and I appreciate that very much. So, Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. I think you all received the packet, and we'll start off with the 3-page summary of what we're recommending for this year. For those of you who don't know, on March 1st, we sold the agency to a firm called Hub International Northwest. It's one of the 5 largest insurance brokers in the world. It was a very good fit for our office. All of our staff was retained, and we have a lot more resources we can now offer the county because of it. There's no change in staffing from our perspective. I'll still be on for probably as long as Mary's going to be on, and in helping you go through the insurance. So start off with the property insurance. The renewal premium for this year is $162,834. Again, to remind everyone, we have $10 million of basic limits for earthquake and flood, and then the county purchased another $10 million excess earthquake from CIS starting in 2008. So you have a total limit of $20 million. Overall, the increase was about $23,000 or close to 17% from last year. Primarily for 2 reasons. One, the CIS did a recent property appraisal. They do it every 5 years, and that increased the values on the buildings by 15%. And overall, we added the Pfizer building and increased replacement costs of the public services building during this last year. So all those changes in values really drove up the rates. For the tort and auto liability, we're recommending a change in this. For the last number of years, we've had what we call a max aggregate deductible. So each year we pick a limit of the maximum that the county would be responsible for. Starting out in 2014, we had a $75,000 aggregate limit, and this last year we had a $100,000 aggregate limit. The problem is that the county's had some very severe claims during this period of time, and you've maxed out those aggregate limits a number of those years. And so we're recommending going to a per claim limit. You don't have a lot of frequency of claims, but when you do have a claim, it's fairly severe. So we're looking at saving some money by going on a per claim deductible, and you would actually have some significant savings, if you compare it to having the aggregate deductible in the past. So we're recommending that switch. By doing that, you're actually saving $112,000 over what the same type of plan you were on last year would have been costing you. So we think it's a great year to go to per aggregate deductible, try it. You feel $10,000 is a good limit to start with, and see how we do for 2021. The crime and cyber liability we have with travelers, again, this increased about $4,000 or close to 22%, primarily due to claims arising from cyber throughout the U.S. Unfortunately, public entities have been hit for a number of cyber losses. We just had one recently with another member close by that had a close to $1.2 million loss where they fraudulently changed the bank account of one of their vendors. They didn't do a verification that it was a request made from that vendor, and they wired a payment of $1.2 million to another vendor, and so we made a claim on that. luckily, the bank that they were with pursued it and was able to get the money back for them. So there actually wasn't a claim, but there could have been a potential of a $1.2 million claim in this type of cyber crime.
Was that Tillamook County?
It's closer than you think.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I won't just divulge the city, but it was somebody in Lynn County, let's say.
All right.
Employee dishonesty and miscellaneous bonds. We have a separate bond for the Fair Board. It's a 3-year bond, and this is the last year, the 3rd year installment. We recommend that the county stay with workers' comp with City County. It's a decrease of $13,793 or 8%. Primarily, your experience mod has gone from a 0.91 to a 0.77, which is excellent. I know there's been discussion about how the unfortunate fatality affects your workers' comp, but in the workers' comp arena, you're really not penalized for severity of claims. You're penalized more for frequency.
Okay.
And your frequency of claims has stayed pretty stable. So any claim is capped at it's $17,500 for this year. I think it's going up to $18,000 next year. But those severe claims are capped, so they won't have that much of a dramatic impact on your workers' compensation. Experience mod, you should still be, in the 70s going into next year. So again, overall for the property liability, totals excluding workers' comp is $622,078. Was an increase of $41,847 or 7.21%. But again, that's actually, we're saving $112,000 by switching to a per deductible plan, so it could have been even worse than that. And then the workers' comp is $156,536, a decrease of $13,000 or 8.10%. Any questions?
I guess I had a question for Mary on the change in the automobile insurance, switching to a per claim deductible. Are you comfortable with that change?
Yeah, yes, I am. And Steve is right that we don't have very many claims, but when we have one, we have a big one. And that was taking up our full deductible. Had we not had the one claim, all the other claims wouldn't have met the deductible. So it'll be capped if we have another really big claim, and then the other small ones will be fine. So yeah.
That seems like a clever way to reduce the costs. That was a good idea. So,
we took a look at a lot of different options this year, even going up to 150,000 retention. But we felt that doing the analysis, it really makes more sense going to a per claim deductible, and you don't have a lot of events that you have frequency of claimants. So we feel it's a good switch, and we'll see how it works.
Sounds good.
Any other questions on the insurance?
No, Steve did a great job and answered my questions as he went along.
No,
Thank you.
Really appreciate the handout, Steve. That made it easy to follow.
Good.
Well, I would move that we approve the proposed renewal for the 2020-2021 property liability and workers' comp insurance policies.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Well, thank you for a nice, concise summary of our insurance situation, and we will.
We hope to see you in person again soon.
Hopefully.
Can you
We
tell
can
me,
wave at you.
tell me again what HUB stands for?
So it's just it doesn't stand for anything but just HUB. It was formed back in Canada, and what it was is there's just a number of agencies banded together, and they decided to call it HUB. So it's HUB International. Again, they're very supportive of us in the community. We're still sponsoring and giving back like we always have, so we don't see it's going to be a change, and we'll have a lot more resources to help the county move forward.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Sounds like a good deal all around. Glad to hear there were no personnel changes at your agency, and look forward to finding out that just how this change looks going forward.
Good. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary.
See y'all. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.
All right. Next up is our consent calendar, which is just approval of last Tuesday's June 16th meeting minutes, which I was not at, but I will ask for a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I will second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Consent calendar is approved. Next up is our EOC weekly report. And I think we have Brian Lee, George Looney, and there's Charlie and Danielle Brown. So I'm not sure how you want to start off. Do you want to start off, Brian, or Joy?
So, morning, folks. My piece is pretty short. We are working on our ramp down process right now, kind of keeping all of our processes in place and cleaning things up so we're ready to reactivate. And other than that, I will turn it over to Charlie and Bruce to discuss their portion, or Danielle to discuss her portion.
Great, thank you. Charlie.
Yeah, maybe we'll get an update from Danielle on current work there, and then have a discussion about a possible resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning again, thanks. So at the EOC this week, we're working on trying to find more isolation units. As we discussed last week, the 3 recreational vehicles that we had rented, as of yesterday, were no longer available. So we are looking at all other options to try and figure out additional isolation opportunities for individuals who can't adequately isolate at home. We're also working on agreements with Samaritan for the alternate care site planning post-August, the mid-August deadline of no longer being able to use OSU dorms as an option. So Kelly Hauer has been working closely with with Samaritan to find alternatives to that location. So should we need an alternate care site after August, we have something set up. None of that is at all solidified at this point, so we're still having a lot of discussions and planning. But at this point, we're just doing a lot of the legwork to try and get something stood up.
Okay. I assume this is part of the discussion of finding a hotel or motel that's willing to be involved in this. And that's...
Yes, correct.
And that's still a work in progress.
Yes, it is still a work in progress, yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Danielle?
No. I've been speaking regularly with Commissioner Tucker from Lynn County about this topic, and I know he's called you as well. It's been very frustrating that we can't get a local hotel or motel to offer room for someone that needs to isolate, especially since any customer should be presumed potentially COVID positive, whether they're tested or untested. And so cleaning protocols need to be as good as possible for all, and not just in the case of a known COVID positive. So it's very frustrating.
Okay.
Hey, Commissioners, one thing to chime in on that too. I've talked with Danielle a lot, some of the other health department folks about it. One of our plans is to set up a more congregate type mobile setup, possibly at the fairgrounds or somewhere else. That would involve like separate easy up or tent space, very, very separated as much as possible. And that would be only for COVID positive, confirmed positives that didn't have another place to self-isolate. If we don't have another option, that way it's ADA compliant and everything else. We actually already ordered ADA compliant cots to support that and just kind of laying some groundwork for it anyways. So we do have some backup plans if something happens and we need to do it immediately. So we're laying some groundwork, but yeah, the hotel piece has been extremely frustrating, and the state said that other folks figured it out, but when I contacted those other counties, they said they had the same problem, that no one will truly agree to it unless it's really, 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 really bad. So just ongoing problems with that.
Yeah, it's a frustration. And I think that it'll become more of a need in the fall as weather turns bad.
And we get more.
Agreed.
Get OSU students back. We get all kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for Danielle?
I just wanted, maybe my question will be for Charlie or Danielle. What kind of spike do you anticipate coming? A spike in recurrence?
Yeah, I'll defer to Charlie for that answer.
Well, let me pull out my crystal ball, Commissioner. There really is no way to tell. There is no question that there will continue to be more cases. There is the high likelihood that at some point our area will be affected by some sort of super spreader event, as a number of these food processing and faith communities and other folks, the more people are gathering together, the more opportunity for someone who is highly infectious to infect more than one or two or three other people. Multnomah County just had a big bump over the week, late last week and over the weekend. They looked into that very closely, and they are still seeing primarily family and small group spread, but the rate of that spread was a lot of cases. Can't remember the number exactly, but over the weekend they had a really significant bump. The other side of that coin is the sort of events that Lincoln County and Union County encountered, where potentially the same type of person with the same infectiousness, but is in a setting with 20 or 40 or 90 or 140 other people, and instead of infecting the rest of a family or a small group gathering of 3 or 4, infects a lot of others. There really is no way to tell, but I think we're operating on the assumption that at some point a large event will happen. When and where, that will be part of kind of the next thing we want to discuss. And I think the fatigue factor definitely kicks in. We're all sick and tired of masking and staying apart. We all want to be close together, but I think the thing to remember is COVID is not at all tired of this, and it's still actively operating, and we need to maintain all of our precautions as much as possible within as much as our circumstances, our economy, our social systems, our families will allow.
So with the uptick here locally, 3 more positives reported over the weekend and 2 today, is that also just small family events? Do you know from the contact tracing what we're seeing?
So we do have a couple of focal incidents that we're working on, but they are limited. They're quite small. They have not spread to large numbers of people. 2 long-term care facilities and 1 other location where most of these are attached to. I think one thing I will point out that of those last 5, 3 of those have been in their 20s. So, and you know, I heard a report out of Florida with their huge increase, a significant portion of their recent infections have been in younger and young middle-aged people, and it really sort of, you know, the sort of common wisdom out there, and the thing that we see in a lot of youth and other groups who are reluctant to wear masks or to keep distance, is that this is an old person's disease. There isn't a lot to worry about. It's not like the flu. But in fact, young people are getting ill, and a certain number of those folks will have very serious effects from it. You know, whether they are, you know, we've been worried about young people who were asymptomatically infected, but in fact, you know, there are young people who are very symptomatic, and particularly those with underlying health conditions.
Okay.
We're always upbeat around here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I might add, this is Bruce, to the conversation. Certainly, I would expect the hospital to look like it did. Our hospital looked much like it did in March. Actually, it never got really terribly scary there. I'd be surprised if it doesn't get terribly scary in the fall and winter. Just my opinion, my crystal ball. Also on the hotels, I just wanted to chime in that there are 2 legislative concepts in the Oregon legislature under the special session that pertain to COVID issues, and what one of the things that they pertain to is perhaps having some immunity for hotel owners, et cetera, against civil liability, you know, due to a COVID patient being there. So I just wanted to update you on that there are 2 legislative concepts in Salem that are happening around this issue.
Yeah, it's part of the omnibus bill from each side of the chamber. I'm hoping that will make a difference, but my sense is that it's perception and marketing that's at least as much of the issue rather than actual liability, because I know that some counties have offered to indemnify the hotels. That hasn't made a difference. Yeah,
I would agree with that, Commissioner. You know, we're glad to see any potential relief, but you know, my colleagues are wondering how effective liability protection will really be, since that's not something we're hearing a lot about as we do our outreach. I think the one other thing, you know, I'll add to what Bruce said. You know, the Yakima Hospital is a large regional level 2 medical system. Their ICU has been on divert for almost 2 weeks. They have the 2nd largest outbreak in the country, have had for many weeks. You know, they are having to send people to Spokane, over the mountains to the Seattle area, and just their experience, the experience that is being felt in the Southeast. You know, regardless, if we can't maintain some of the basic precautions in the face of going back to school, to doing business. If we can't maintain basic precautions, the people that will be most affected, that will be hospitalized, that will be in home isolation and will be out of circulation, will be those frontline workers. You know, in the businesses, in the grocery stores, they will be the frontline healthcare workers, the very medical workers that we'll need, and may possibly, most of all, it will be those lower income, primarily minority labor workers, whose living and working conditions do put them at the highest risk, sort of regardless of the precautions, the best precautions that their employers try to take. Just the nature of the work puts them at risk, and they are very much among our least able families to support and sustain that sort of burden. And so I think just to keep that piece in mind, that is the current and projected epidemiology of this, that remote work, operating like we are doing here today, as all of our county employees, so many of them are working remotely, that is a real privilege. And we have a significant portion of our population who it's impossible for them to enjoy that privilege. And so just keeping that in mind.
Is the Yakima outbreak largely among agricultural workers?
It is. Very, very much so. And in fact, they're orchard workers. All but one packing plant was on strike for several weeks over working conditions. They have settled all of those strikes, as I understand it now, and have upgraded safety precautions to the satisfaction of the workers within those fields and the processing plants and warehouses. But and I think that because of the proportion of the Yakima County population that does that kind of work, they're particularly susceptible to the type of outbreaks that they're happening. I think we have not yet seen what the effect will truly be on young people, because schools were released and everyone went into isolation, and schools have new guidelines. We will be working with them on that. Higher education is putting in a lot of precautions, but at this point, there really are very, very few universities in the country that are operating, and the ones that are operating under some pretty extreme precautions. So as we go into fall, that will be a whole new experiment where everyone's doing their best to imagine precautions and put things in place ahead of time, but we don't have a lot of experience with this virus, with people back in those circumstances, with doors and windows closed, closed buses and cars, and we'll have to see what happens.
And Commissioners, I just want to jump in on the update with the face mask covering. We're still working with Corvallis Towing Brigade. They're tired, so they're starting to ramp things back down. We'll find out more about whether or not they can meet our agricultural workers' needs for cloth masks, reusable cloth masks. If not, we may need to order some from the Department of Corrections to meet the needs for that community. So more on that to come.
Thank you.
So jumping, Commissioner, if I can, just jumping off of that and the face coverings, I'll let Dr. Thompson speak up, but he has made a strong recommendation that the elected officials in the county and the municipalities seriously consider proclamation or resolution calling on the population of Benton County and our cities to voluntarily wear masks in all indoor circumstances throughout the county. This is the evidence of effectiveness of this is growing. It's pretty well proven that this does help reduce communicability of this virus. We know that lockdown and isolation works, but we also know that cover your cough, hand washing, personal distancing works. You know, we have a bit of a double-edged sword. People sometimes think if they're wearing a mask, they can avoid, you know, they can get close together and they can ignore some of the other precautions. We need everything, but we would like to open the discussions we have with one of you, at least individually, about considering a Board of Health resolution and having discussions with the municipalities about a resolution, not a mandate, to mask at all times. OSU has taken this step. Schools are leaning in that direction. A lot of businesses are required to do that already. So having that recommendation be universal, I think it is it's going to be a difficult expectation when OSU comes back. If they have a policy, which they do, to be masked indoors at all times on campus in any OSU facility, but then we sort of have the mixed message of when you're not on campus, there's no parallel recommendation. So,
have you got such a resolution ready, Charlie?
We do not. We wanted to sort of moot this today, and we can prepare a draft fairly quickly, but wanted to see what appetite there may be for this.
I'm absolutely in favor that this is something that we been doing at least partially, and I think it's being consistent around town, around Corvallis makes sense, and it's just your crystal ball and what's coming in the fall. I think
get ready.
This just makes sense, and we all hopefully all have masks already, and just getting more used to when and where to use them. And I think a proclamation resolution, I see Vance Groney is with us. Do you want to add anything to the conversation, Vance?
Yeah, we've had a pretty good back and forth via email the last 24 hours. And one of the, I guess a couple things. Number one, a proclamation is probably a very good vehicle to convey the board's position with regard to face masks. Number two, and I think this is important for everybody to remember, and it's important, I think, for the public, a proclamation does not create a local law. And that's significant, because if the board were to decide it wishes to move forward with a proclamation, I suspect you'd want it to be phrased such that you strongly recommend and encourage for the health of the Benton County citizens and others that people wear masks in public and at businesses, et cetera, et cetera. We want to avoid making it a mandate where the board says you will wear masks, because then we get into the very sticky situations of how do we enforce it?
Exactly.
How, and this is Brian's concern, if we're going to mandate masks, how do we supply masks to people who may not have masks? Third, and this is candidly a fight I don't think anybody wants to get into at this point in time, what if a city or two, a Philomath, Corvallis, Monroe, doesn't want the Benton County Board of Commissioners telling its citizens how to conduct themselves in public? So by having a proclamation that strongly recommends for the health, safety, and well-being of others, masks in public, you really get the message out. I think you really advance what Dr. Thompson is talking about and what Charlie's talking about in terms of the proven evidentiary value of face masks without putting the county in a position of having to do something in force that we probably can't. Because the last thing, and this is what I told the group on email, the last thing I want Benton County to do is to get into July having made tremendous strides in terms of educating our population, our citizens, to the need for social distancing, limiting gatherings, masks, thereby raising the credibility of our health department, only to issue a mandate that we can no longer enforce, and then have some of that credibility erode as we head into the fall, where we're going to need all of that public goodwill. So, I think it's a great idea for proclamation. I think that the idea of the proclamation not requiring but strongly recommending is a terrific idea.
Okay. Thank you. I know, I assume we all have received several emails supporting this concept. In fact, one of those emails was from Nick Girth. Nick, did you want to kind of reinforce the message that you sent us recently?
I will, and thank you, Commissioner, for inviting some comment. I guess I'm happy to see any progress on this matter. I do think a proclamation or a resolution is a good thing. I don't personally feel it goes far enough. And I just want to share with you, I earlier this morning got off the phone with a neighbor in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Chippewa County is very similar in size and makeup and demographics to Benton County, and I've sort of, it's a second home to me, and I've kind of kept my eye on it from a COVID perspective. And they have about the same number of COVID cases. Thankfully, they do not have the same number of deaths, but a lot of similarities, even in terms of the proximity of a university campus. And the conversation I had with my neighbor was exactly the point I made in the email, and he echoed it without having any knowledge of my email. But out there, Menards is the big box store, right? Like Home Depot or Lowe's here. And Menards is requiring face masks of all of its patrons, just as Costco is here. And he said, when I walk into Menards, I feel relatively safe. And I would echo, that's the same sentiment I feel when I walk into Costco. And I have to argue the point that we cannot enforce a mandate. I would ask, how is it possible that Menards and Costco can enforce and stay in business with their patronage and we cannot? But the additional point that my neighbor made there was, he said, there are stores, the local grocery store is not enforcing masks. And so the solution is simple. I'm not going to shop there. I'm going to go to Target in the neighboring town of Eau Claire, which is like driving to Albany, where they are requiring masks, and I'll do my shopping there. And that's exactly, the point I shared with you, with my son and wife going to Great Clips for a first haircut. They were masked up. The hairdressers were masked up. 2 patrons sitting in the chairs next to my son were not masked up. We won't be going back to Great Clips. So frankly, I think in the end you're shooting yourself in the foot, if not from an economic standpoint, then of course from a health safety standpoint. But I would strongly urge that we consider a mandate. I'm happy for the resolution, but I think the same people that do not care enough about their fellow man today to wear a mask are the same people who are not going to care about a resolution. Thank you.
I have a comment. I'm wondering, when there could be, I don't know, Nick, if this fits with you, but we could look at to begin with, is a proclamation or a resolution, and then as we see how that works, kind of go with the potential threat of you're going to be required to it or something like that. I don't know how that fits, but you could do a progression of some sort, starting with a resolution or a proclamation. Just an idea. I'm all for making sure people wear masks.
Well, and Nick, I like your approach of I'm not going back to that shop because they didn't require patrons to mask up, and I think that can be a very effective tool in our toolbox of I think Corvallis and Benton County is probably ahead of most counties as far as percentage of people that wear a mask when they're in public, indoors anyway, and figure out how to harness that power of where I will shop, where I won't shop. I think should get business people's attention. They I can see they don't want to be the policeman in their shop, but if people aren't coming to their shop because of how they're operating, they need to get that word. And thank you for your example and thoughtful discussion here. We have Chris.
Thank you.
We have Chris Workman from Philomath. Do you want to add anything to this conversation, Chris? Find the button, Chris.
You have to unmute.
Okay.
I heard him for a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can get back to us later, Chris, but I appreciate you being on most of this call anyway. So is that enough direction for Vance and the health department to proceed?
Yes, thank you. We can move ahead with that, prepare a proclamation for your review, hopefully utilize some of your connections and influence to open that conversation with the municipalities, and just, sort of a last reminder and back to Commissioner Armijo's original question way back when, just that within the last couple of days, the commissioners of Ada County, Idaho, where Boise is, have voluntarily backed down to their phase 1 because of the level of infection that they've seen in that county. And so I think that this kind of action is a responsible and logical first step
First.
And then we will keep tabs on and keep you posted on how things progress. But we can be back to you very rapidly with
the second
proclamation.
step or third step.
So just to chime in for a moment, I know that there was an intent to check in with the municipalities, but I suspect we haven't had a chance to really do that thoroughly yet. But a resolution and a proclamation would not have the same effect or of overriding local wishes. It's more of a statement of intent. So I think that that's a good strategy. And I think one of the types of language I would use is that what we need to do is protect our gains. We really did flatten the curve here, and we need to ensure that we continue to protect those gains and maintain the efficacy of our healthcare system.
Absolutely.
Well, and we have a couple examples from different counties in the state, Lincoln County and Union County, and just how devastating this infection can be, and going along and thinking, well, it's not a problem here, it's a problem in the big cities or somewhere else. That's not that's not accurate.
Polk was rolled into the governor's last mandate as well, primarily because of its connections with Marion. Mm-hmm. But they are another smaller rural county that is being very heavily impacted.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I think there's approximately 7 counties that are day after tomorrow are I guess is the right word, mandated to have the mask business in place, and those are neighboring counties. We shouldn't be doing different things in different counties. This is kind of tagging along with voluntarily what's already going on in our neighborhood. So
I think that the resolution or whatever we do makes a lot of sense. I think we need to be prepared. Nevertheless, if it really begins to spike, we may have to look at a more serious statement. But as long as we keep that in mind, that we're ready to do that, I think we could start with the proclamation or resolution type, and then then be prepared to go forward as necessary.
And on the proclamation, I think sooner the better. It sounds like there's been a fair amount of work already done, so let's...
You got it done already, Vance?
We'll take that for a yes, Vance.
Perfect.
All
Do
right.
we need a motion to do that, or do we just, by sense of the board? I think we're okay.
I think until we actually consider the proclamation or resolution,
That's right.
we probably don't need it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean the instruction to legal counsel to go ahead and do it. Yeah.
From the nodding, I think we've been pretty clear about our support. So I think we.
Commissioner, this is Brian. I don't know if the other city managers are still on the phone. I know they were going to call in, and we might want to kind of find out if they have any feedback on it or any thoughts for their communities. I was hoping Mark Shepard would be on as well. I don't know if there's any city managers that want to chime in on that, though. I just want to make sure they got the opportunity.
Thank you. I called on Chris Workman a few minutes ago, and he did not respond, and that's the only city manager that I see on the board here.
And Kate just joined back in.
I saw that Kate Portia rejoined us. Did you have any comment on this masking resolution, Kate?
Hi guys, sorry, I'm here in Albany working on our house this afternoon. I think the only, and maybe you guys already talked about it, I apologize for the delay, but I think just the one thought that's come up is related to enforcement and how that'll work. And that's really the concern that we've been hearing. We have been talking about a social campaign that we could work on to help share and get the word out about Benton County wearing masks, things like that, but that's about all I have to add.
Okay.
Well, I don't think you were online when Nick Kurth talked about his experience with a local haircutting place where most everybody had masks, the staff did, but a couple patrons did not, and he's not planning on going back to that business because of lack of enforcement of everybody who comes in there should be masked. So I think that's one of the tools that we have is voting with our supporting the businesses like Costco that have the you come in our store, you have a mask policy versus well, you should have a mask, but we won't bother really enforcing this approach. So I think from the business standpoint, getting the word out, I think is probably one of our most effective tools that we have. And like I was saying earlier, I think Benton County is relatively ahead of the game as far as percentage of people that have masks and use them. And so I think we've got a relatively easy sell here.
I do too. I think so.
Yeah, and I think the only other question that Mark had asked, and Danielle, I don't know if you and Mark Shepard had a chance to talk, but was related to whether or not this ordinance would cover the cities as well. That is, would it be driven by public health and cover all the cities within Benton County, or then would you
That's a good question.
or would you want each city to weigh in individually?
I mean,
that
it's a
kind of
good
thing.
question.
Kate, it's not an ordinance. It's a proclamation or resolution of our intent, and I would appreciate comments from other jurisdictions around the county, but I think we are talking about all of Benton County.
From the health department's point of view, we would encourage and help support the municipalities to mirror such a proclamation. We'd strongly encourage that, strongly recommend parallel proclamations and recommendations from the municipalities.
That's a great point, Charlie, because this is voluntary, and we're trying to get the word out, and that's another way of letting people know that this is serious. And I think, like Commissioner Ogerow mentioned earlier, we don't want to lose the gains. Mid-March through mid-June, you want to do that again, and that I assume everybody's answer is no. And this is one fairly simple, doesn't cost much thing that we can actually help everyone. So I see Lilia popped up. Did you Lilia, did you want to weigh in on this?
And Lori did also. Lori just didn't.
Sorry, Commissioner. Thank you very much for that opportunity. I just wanted to say that, either way, I think that we're going to have a messaging moment to our community, just because even within this call, we are seeing that we don't have total understanding between resolution, proclamation, ordinance. So we're just going to need to have some very clear messaging around what a proclamation is and what it does. And I think just underscoring really that because it's not an ordinance and this is just a very strong encouragement, recommendation, ask, just kind of differentiating that from what an actual ordinance would look like. So I just wanted to mention that there might be some confusion out there as we move into this next phase, and that's just something to keep in mind, especially if, as Commissioner Jaramillo mentioned, it is kind of a stacked approach, if you will, and you leave that firmer option available if the situation really does worsen. So just wanted to put out that piece from an information perspective.
Well, thank you. And Lori, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to ensure that once the proclamation is drafted, having the opportunity for Benton County to connect with the local jurisdictions. I did speak with 3 of the local city managers or city representatives yesterday regarding this discussion. Chris Workman was able to at least link in. The other 2 were not able to. And I believe, garnering their support is important, but, having those dialogues in advance would be critical, I think, to ensure that support to the board.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Let's see. Do we still have George Looney with us?
I'm
here.
All right. We're getting back to you about the EOC update / finance.
So after having Brian set in for me last week, not really a lot of change from last week to this week as things are slowing down, especially within the EOC. We're certainly seeing less costs. Things still are moving pretty fast with health. So really our expenses are up just slightly, mainly due to payroll, a little bit of reopening costs, and we had an additional payment to Dr. Thompson. There are no additional expenditures over $3K, no additional contracts or amendments. Still that piece setting out there of the isolation sheltering with, there's been mention of an RV, there's different things, so that might be showing up at some point. Payroll certainly continues to be our biggest challenge, although the colleague that I am working with from the city has done an amazing job of getting huge backlogs of 214s up to date. And so I think we're very close to really being up to date on those, which then means I get to go back and redo all of the spreadsheets and kind of true everything up. But I've been kind of lax and holding off on that until she gets everything done. So maybe I get to only do it one time instead of multiple. But really nothing too spectacular this week. It's kind of weird. I look at the date. I'm reporting on June 12th, and here we are on the 23rd. But I am going to give you just kind of a little bit of an update for this week that I think we're going to see. Well, I'll be working on through the 19th, but we won't see, I don't think, a whole lot of difference there. But for the week that we're currently in, I will expect payroll to jump as we're doing orientation training and have 16 to 20 additional folks in here for 3 hours. That's going to push our payroll costs up a little bit. But that's really it. I don't know of any additional funding that's come in at this point. And but any questions?
Well, I guess one, on the funding side, this is the CARES Act funding that came to the state, and I've seen different breakdowns of what counties and cities can expect. And I'm not sure if the legislative special session will get into that, but seems like that there's significant dollars that we can see over the horizon that haven't quite made it to us. So, do you have any insights on that, or probably you're like everybody else, and if they go by the formula, well, Benton County gets $2 million or whatever the number is, but we have not seen the money or a real timetable for when that might actually get to us.
I think you're exactly correct, Commissioner. And my understanding, and I think it actually came through an email, and Mary can help as well, is that my understanding is that the amount that we submitted that we expect to get the majority of, but that the initial idea was that the state really asked the counties or the different entities for what their reimbursement was going to be, and after they got them, they decided that maybe there should be a little bit more formal of a grant type application, so there's maybe a few more hoops to jump through. But at this point, my understanding is our initial request, which went in May, that we are going to get the majority of, and that there will be another submission in July for expenses incurred after, I believe, May 15th.
Okay.
But Mary can add to that.
Right, I just got our grant form back signed by the state, and so we had to fill it out, sign it, and agree to it. It goes to them, they signed it, sent it back to us, and the money should be arriving now, soon, and they have just said nothing about any adjustments, so what we submitted, I expect to get is.
So, Mary, yesterday, in a discussion with commissioners at the AOC meeting, there was a lot of frustration about that IGA with the state, that it was a lengthy document with a lot of legalese. But because of the fact that we already receive a lot of federal grant money for other programs, it doesn't present as many obstacles to us, does it? We already have to go through a federal audit because of the amount of federal dollars we receive. Okay, yeah, there was some talk about some counties suing the state, and I just didn't think that we would be in that boat.
No, and Vance reviewed the document before I signed it, and yeah, it was nothing new. It was federal language.
Yeah.
Cities in particular, and a lot of the smaller counties don't receive $500,000 of federal funding, so they don't need a single audit. This will require a single audit.
Exactly.
They get a lot of money for it, so I think they'll be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other financial questions?
Yes, they have amazing. Well, my daughter was a high school kid, and so
thank you very much, George and Mary, and I assume we will hear the shouting when the money actually gets to Benton County. Won't even need
We will definitely do that, and I will see you next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, before we move off the EOC discussion item, I wondered if I might spend 5 minutes briefly presenting communication numbers from the last 2 months.
Please.
Thank you. Erica, could you make me presenter? Thank you. And Alyssa, if you have anything to share, please feel free to jump in. Okay, so it looks like from my end, you all can see my screen.
Yep.
George, looks like your mic's still on. You might want to mute that. Okay, commissioners, so what you're taking a look at is a summary presentation, because I was a little bit late in getting you April, and then I am actually more on time in getting you May. So what I thought I'd do is I would provide a summary of March, April, May. So what you're going to be looking at is summary numbers for each platform. So we'll look at web and social, and then we're going to specifically look at video. So of course, our website has been our primary communication strategy in reaching members of the public, whether it's social media or our print pieces. We're constantly sending folks to our COVID-19 phone bank for that one-to-one human touch with questions, or to our website that has numerous pages. If you haven't been on, I really encourage you to do so. We've put a huge amount of work into that. But without further ado, over the past 3 months, the Joint Information Center has either created or updated 131 web pages. Obviously, the majority of this content is in English, but 12% of that content is in Spanish. We actually have a specific section on our website in Spanish, a grouping of several pages. Bottom right, out of the 131 website updates, we primarily are talking about positive cases, resources to support our communities, and our overall county response through the Emergency Operations Center, as well as that policy level with you all. And then in terms of reach and impressions, I have this broken down for each month, but 3 different pieces of information. So the first set of bar charts right here is going to be for March. And so for homepage views in March, 77,000 people hit the COVID-19 homepage, which is wonderful. As you can see, in April, it dropped to 50, and then here in May, it dropped to 43,000, which is normal and understandable as people are getting the information they need. What I really wanted to highlight actually was the subpage views. So this is where we put a huge amount of work in May when we moved into phase 1. Folks had been at home for a month, and so we produced a suite of pages for phase 1, and then in June we did that again for phase 2. So in May, you'll see that our subpage views went up 20,000 from April to May. So I think that the effort that our team put in producing those guidance documents for phase 1 reopening was absolutely worth it. And then you'll also see in this last group of bar charts that per day, we had our largest number of visitors visit our website per day in May. And I can tell you that I drilled down to the actual date, and that was the date of that we submitted our application for reopening. So it wasn't even May 15th when we would have been approved to reopen. It was the 12th when we submitted. So really interesting. Next is our daily videos. As you know, this has been a priority tactic for the Joint Information Center. Early on in the emergency, the EOC director directed us to produce these videos as a primary tactic to reach folks who are at home during the stay-at-home order. So over the past 3 months, we have produced 60 total videos, which makes sense since we're doing 1 a day. In total, 80% of our videos are produced in English, and I'm really proud that 13 of these total of 60 videos have been produced in Spanish, which is 18% of all of our video content. Within the video content, of course, we've focused primarily on our case updates, and then, of course, the next topics are government service updates. This is going to be updates not only from the county level, but the OHA state level, from the governor's office, OEM, as well as CDC and World Health Organization service updates. Again, county response to outbreak and prevention. And then what I'm really thrilled to show is that over the past 3 months, 200,000 people have seen these 60 videos across a variety of platforms, and better yet, rather than just seeing them, 79,000 people actually took the time out of their day to watch them and receive their information. So I'm really proud of the team that's been putting together that content, because I can see, obviously, the community is really engaging with it. And then lastly, I just chose one of our social media platforms because we do have so many, and that would belabor the presentation. Facebook is probably our best performing platform during this emergency, so that's why I chose to share this one. Again, over the last 3 months, we've issued approximately 291 posts on social media. In March alone, we reached about 150,000 people on Facebook. April, still pretty high, 148,000, and a bit of a drop here in May as we begin to reopen. Folks aren't at home as much, they're getting back to work, so that's 132,000. Again, you'll see a slight drop here on the engagement. What engagement means on Facebook is that you've either clicked that more link to see the full text, you've engaged with the link post, you've enlarged the photo, some sort of click interaction. And then again, you'll see that on this platform, we're really hitting the service updates, resources for support, prevention information. So this, again, Facebook content is pretty indicative of what it looks like across Instagram and Twitter, but I just chose to show one platform this morning. So is there any pieces of information that you'd like me to revisit at this time, or any other questions? Commissioner Ojiro.
One question, and it's not about this content. I really appreciate the update. It's good to know what how the messaging is getting out and what's being successful. But it's about our hotline and whether that's still in use, how much call volume we're getting. And I also know that you all get email feedback from the community as well as us. And just curious to know whether you're receiving very much feedback right now by email to the general address or not, and what the nature of it is.
Just 1 second. Kelly? Kelly? Genevieve, can you get Kelly? Do you have the phone count number for the phone log? Andy's phone count number? Can you look that up for me? Thank you. So, Commissioner, I'm getting some information on the phone bank data. It's somewhere in our drive, and I'm just not sure where it's at. But I can tell you the email answer pretty easily. So for the past week and a half, we're responding to between 2 and 4 emails a day. Yesterday, I responded to an email that was about the discrepancy in the numbers between the county's count and the state's count, and why that is. I reviewed an email response that was a question about why our county board has not opted into the governor's mask requirement as she's instituted in 9 counties. There was another question about playground equipment. It's rare to see a trend in our email communications, but there has been more of a trend in the phone communications. And I can get you that number in terms of the quantity that's coming into the phone bank. I do know that it has reduced since we started reopening, and so they were looking at a reduced staffing plan as EOC was scaling back as well. However, I can tell you it's still up, it's still English, Spanish, and at least the Joint Information Center feels that it needs to stay up for the foreseeable future.
Good. So, and at this point, the hours are remaining the same, but...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's part of what I wanted to know, just so we know also where to direct people and to be able to continue to follow what you're learning, what you're hearing.
So that phone bank data just came in. We've received over 400 phone calls, and we're averaging 10 calls a day. So I would say that's fairly consistent in terms of folks reaching out for content.
Excellent. Well, I'm grateful that people have a live person to talk to.
Oh, me too, absolutely. Sometimes I think it's just knowing that there's someone at the end of the phone who understands that we're all worried.
Thank you.
Any other, absolutely. Any other thoughts or comments, questions from Commissioner Jaramillo, Commissioner Malone?
Really appreciate the update. I knew you folks were busy, but it's nice to get the pie charts and probably we need to see where the trends are, where the where people's concerns lie, and especially if they're changing significantly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Well, appreciate that.
All right.
Update, and you can get back to your lunch. And
thank you so much for letting me pop in and present these numbers, Commissioner. I appreciate the time on the agenda.
well, appreciate you doing that. It wasn't on the official agenda, but it was a nice addition, and I think we're not having another board meeting for 2 weeks, so
okay.
It's good to good timing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving right along here. Number 8, information sharing from the 3 of us. Do you have anything, Annabelle?
Oh, not really.
I mean, we.
I'm probably going to be taking the third week in August to watch a nomination convention, and it is going to be remote.
Okay, and you are a delegate.
And I am a delegate.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Zan?
You already heard about the broadband. That was a major thing that I've been working on. So the only other things on my list were the fact that we need to decide which of us is going to be the liaison to the 911 advisory board and who is going to be the liaison to the governor's weekly call. So, yeah.
What's the governor's weekly call?
Basically, Governor Brown's responding to the fact that the large one-way information call on Fridays is not meeting the needs of everyone.
No, right,
And so they are trying to be more flexible and create a once-a-week opportunity for one commissioner from each of the 36 counties to be on the phone and have much more of a dialogue with the governor's office. Leah Horner will be coordinating that, and we don't have a date and time set yet. AOC is compiling the list of all of the commissioners, and we'll go from there. So they just want to have one point person per county and maybe a backup so that it can, so it could be you as chair and me as a backup. Or
and is that the regional approach?
No.
It's
no. This is just one person per county, and it's just intended to be a more regular point of contact with the governor's office with an ability to have dialogue. The regional, we had our listening post meeting last week. That is something I could update you on for our region, and that went quite well. It was not very well attended. We had just 2 commissioners from Lane County, Commissioners Buck and Burney, and Commissioner Tucker from Lynn County, and that was it. So we had a nice discussion about issues, and the issues that are facing us are very similar to those that are facing all the other districts. But we, in contrast to the others, felt like there was a lot more collaboration and partnership going on, I think, than in some of the other districts, and didn't have as much of a sense of lack of information that some of the districts had. So.
Well, and it's been a probably continuing pet peeve of mine is different configurations for the counties depending on which call it is, and more consistency, I think, would help the discussions, because you know the other commissioners or attendees at the call, and then the next topic and you get reshuffled and
Yeah.
it, I think really hurts the effort and
I know that AOC, the director, Gina Nickel, is really making an attempt to more actively use the district structure in order to have these conversations. In my previous 3 years, the district structure was used only once a year.
That's right.
And it's becoming more active again.
It used to have quarterly meetings, then it went kind of
Yeah.
by the wayside.
It's one of those things
Yeah.
that it comes and goes with
Yeah,
need,
yeah.
and I think that right now the need is there. And then, of course, it's a little bit different than our Lynn Benton Lincoln trio. So
Right, right.
sometimes we're Lynn Benton Lincoln, sometimes we're Lynn Benton Lane for this purpose. So don't get into all of the geographies for DEQ versus water resources versus whatever. Every single one of those is different.
all right. Anything else?
So we just need to make that decision about, and then who's going to be the board liaison for the 911 advisory board.
right.
Because Teresa's waiting on that, as are the folks from the city, in order to be able to finalize the roster so that they can set up meeting schedule. They'd like to hold a first meeting in a couple of weeks.
How about you, Pat?
Okay. I would be glad to do that. And then the governor's, you said weekly?
That's my recollection.
I think it is, yeah.
Oh, and that could change depending on.
I suspect
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
depending on need.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think that makes sense to have the chair
Yep.
handle that one.
Yep,
and
yep.
So, and vice chair is back up.
Makes sense. Teresa's on the phone, so she has heard that you will be the liaison for the 911 board, I'm sure. Teresa can pipe up. And I'll let Gina.
Yes, I have.
Excellent. I'll let Gina know, as the district chair, that you're going to be our point person for Benton County.
Okay.
And I will forward the information onto the gentleman that contacted me and let him know. And then he'll set up the schedule for the meeting dates and times.
Okay, great. The only thing I had, that hasn't been covered, and this may not be the right meeting to talk about it, but I guess sometime in March we went to this, instead of having the work session and the board meeting separate, we combined them.
Mm-hmm.
And do we want to continue with that structure?
I think so.
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can take care of that, the critical things, and then we can continue
Mhm.
discussion. Yeah.
I like it. It's not 3.5 hours straight. But we don't always do that.
No.
So.
Just today.
So
Last week was long, too.
I was afraid to ask, but no, I think that's
Yeah.
more efficient structure, and I think we will continue it then. Anything else?
We do have a CSC meeting tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was postponed
That's the board
from
meeting.
yesterday because of the AOC meetings that
Right,
were going on
right,
yesterday.
right, yeah.
Okay. And what time? I think it's on my calendar.
9 o'clock, I think.
Okay. Hopefully I don't have too much at the same time.
I believe that they checked with Genevieve for scheduling, so I,
Oh, wrong. Okay, yeah, looks good.
it's, yeah. 9 o'clock.
Anything else? I don't think there is any other, so somebody took my hammer. Meeting adjourned.
Carry it in your back pocket.